Good morning, students. Welcome you all in the fourth lecture of Ind AS 116. Students, 6 hours are left to discuss this Ind AS 116, and we have covered almost 70% of the standard, right? So we have understood how to compute right of use asset calculation, how to remeasure right of use asset, what to do the accounting in case of modification of lease, right? So how to compute the lease liability, right? Then what is the subsequent measurement of lease liability and right of use asset? So we discussed all those aspects, correct? But not to worry, in the next 5-10 minutes, I will revise the last class, okay? And then I'll move on to the next class. Friends, after understanding identified asset, transfer of right to control the use of an asset, right? Lease term, lease payments, then we have reached to the ROU calculation. And we have understood that right of use asset needs to be capitalized when a lessee obtains an underlying asset on the lease basis. A right to use asset is going to be capitalized. But what is the value of right to use asset? Right to use asset is equal to right of use asset is equal to present value of future lease payment, present value of lease liability. You need to compute the lease liability first, right? And what is the lease liability? Lease liability is equal to present value of future lease payments, right? Okay. Sir, what happens if lessee has paid an advance rent which is on or before the commencement date? In that case, that advance rent is also going to be added into the cost of the right of use asset, into the value of the right of use asset. Okay. Sir, what happens if lessee has given some, if the lessee has incurred some cost, for example, cost of registration of a lease, cost to paying a broker, stamp duty, legal fees, this is also going to be added to the value of the right of use asset, right? Sir, what happens if the lessee has done some leasehold improvement? Lessee has done some construction on the leasehold premises and he has to move out. And he has to move out after 20 years, after 10 years, and he has to incur a major amount of, asset retirement obligation, site restoration obligation. In that case, standard says that the present value of that obligation is also going to be added to the cost of ROU, value of the ROU, just like we were doing in PPE standard. Okay. So once we capitalized ROU, right, then there is a subsequent measurement. And what is the subsequent measurement? The subsequent measurement is, you need to see, are you carrying your ROU at cost model or revaluation model? But how can you see? So basically this cost model and revaluation model is typically same, which we have discussed in Ind AS 16. If you have some underlying asset, the similar underlying asset, for example, you have taken a building on a lease basis and some others buildings are also there, right? So if you are applying a cost model for owned building, you will apply the cost model to this ROU as well. In the practical life, my dear friends, in the practical life, the companies are applying cost model to ROU, okay? So friends, when you are applying cost model, you have to compute the carrying value of ROU, which is original cost minus accumulated depreciation minus accumulated impairment. Okay. So it means this ROU is subject to the depreciation and impairment. Yes. So this ROU asset is going to be depreciated over the lease term. But if there is an option to purchase the asset, in that case, and it is reasonably certain that the lessee is going to purchase the asset, in that case, the ROU is going to be depreciated over the useful life of the asset, not over the lease term. But if the purchase option is not there, in that case, ROU is going to be depreciated over the lease term. Right? Friends, ROU asset, since it is an asset, it is also subject to impairment if there is an impairment indicator. For example, the rent has significantly gone down, right? So since you have entered into the agreement, and this has practically happened with me, right? Because I had a contract pre-COVID where the escalation clause is there, right? So I was paying rental as per my original clause, but the prevailing market rental has significantly gone down, right? So friends, this is an indicator and you need to see, recompute the ROU, you need to check whether what is the recoverable value of ROU, and accordingly you will do the impairment also, right? Friends, if I talk about lease liability, since it is a present value of future lease payment, and this present value is arrived after discounting. So at whatever rate you have discounted, you have unwind the discount. Means you have to add the interest over the lease liability. Okay. Why? For example, in the next 5 years, you have to pay 5 lakh rupees. But the present value of this 5 lakh rupees, 3 lakh rupees. Okay. So what is the difference between the present value and the total payment? The 2 lakh rupees, the difference, which is indicating your interest expenses over the 5-year period. So interest has to be charged in P&L, right, at the rate which is used for discounting on the liability. Okay. And friends, when the present value is 3 lakh and you will add interest of rupees 2 lakh, it will become 5 lakh and you will pay 5 lakh. This liability will become zero. This is what we have discussed, right? As an initial measurement and subsequent measurement, we have also discussed that you are free from doing all these complex calculation in two circumstances. Circumstance number one, low value assets, and circumstance number two, short-term leases. If the lease is up to 12 months, you can leave this complex kind of accounting and you can just carry out rent account debit to bank account, rent account debit to expense account, rent account debit to bank account, or rent account debit to lessor account, lessor to bank account. Okay. Friends, there is one exemption. There is one exception to the exemption, that if there is a purchase option is available in the short-term lease, in that case, that lease cannot be considered as a short-term lease for the purpose of availing exemption, right? Then there is a low value leases, right? Friends, if there is a lease arrangement for a low value item, for example, computer, laptop, printer, furniture, fixture, right? In that case, the lease payments for those low value items, for those low value lease arrangements, the company can avail the exemption, and company can decide not to create a ROU, right? In low value leases, you are not required to see the lease term. I mean to say, the lease term could be 5 year as well, right? But the item should be low value item, and the company can carry out what accounting, rent account debit to bank account. But this rent has to be recognized at a systematic basis, right? Or straight lining should be there. For example, in every 1 year, there is a escalation clause. Okay. So if example, 10,000 rent is first year, 11,000 second year, 12,000 third year, 13,000 fourth year, and 15,000 fifth year. So the total payment has to be consolidated, divided by the lease term, and whatever comes, the average comes, that average will be the expense in all these 5-year period, right? Friends, low value lease exemption is not available if the lessee is subleasing the asset. Okay. In case of a sublease contract, this low value lease exemption is not available. This is what we discussed in the last class. We did so many illustration, and we have also discussed one of the complex concept, which is known as lease modification, And what is meant by lease modification? Lease modification means a change in the scope of the lease or a change in the consideration. A change in the scope of a lease can be happen in two manner. Number one, you are increasing or decreasing the underlying asset. You are increasing or decreasing the scope of the underlying asset. Number two, you are increasing or decreasing the lease term, right? There could be two scenarios in which you can change the scope of the lease. Number two, a change in the consideration. For example, your rent is increasing or your rent is decreasing. But the main principle is to consider these changes as a modification, right? These changes should not form part of your original terms and condition of the lease. These changes should not form part of your original terms and condition of the lease, right? If the increase or decrease in the lease term, if the increase and decrease in consideration, if this is part of your original terms and condition of the lease, then it will not be qualified as a lease modification, and you would have already considered the increase or decrease in your present value of lease liability calculations. Correct? Is that right? Yeah. Okay, so friends, we discussed that if there is an increase in the scope of the lease, right? And that increase is in line, with the that increase in the scope is in line with the market rentals, fair value of market rentals, right? In that case, the increase in scope, the change is considered as a new contract. You are not required to change your existing ROU and lease liability, correct? But if the increase in the scope of underlying asset is not commensurating with the increase in market rentals, in the market rentals, in that case, it will not be classified as a new contract. It will be classified as an amendment in the existing contract, right? Number two, so this we talked about the change in the scope, right? When the scope is increasing, and the increase is in line with the market rental, it is a new contract. The scope is increasing, but increase is not in line with the market rental. It means it is negotiated as a single contract. So it is a change in the existing contract. Sir, what happens if the scope is decreasing? For initially you took four rooms on the rental basis. Now you decided to leave one room, right? So this 4 becomes 3 now. There is a decrease in scope, right? So in this case, this decrease will be a new contract, or this decrease will impact the changes in the existing contract. Decrease के केस में क्या होगा?
Change in existing contract, sir.
Of course, change in the existing contract, because you're leaving something, right? You're not adding something, you're leaving something. Your ROU has to go down. Your lease liability has to go down, right? कम होगा ना, क्योंकि आपका underlying asset कम हो गया है. Second, if there is a change in lease term, your lease term was 10 years, now it is increased to 14 years. Okay. And it is not increasing at the beginning of the contract, at the commencement date. It is increasing after some time. So there is a change, there is a modification. So whether this change in lease term will be a new contract or will be a change in the existing ROU and lease liability. It's a change in existing contract, right? क्योंकि कोई नया asset तो add नहीं हो रहा ना. So it is a change in the existing contract. So whenever your lease term is increasing or decreasing, it is a change in existing contract. Third, there is a change in consideration. No underlying asset is changing. There is a change in consideration. A consideration is changing. Is it a fresh contract or is it a change in existing contract?
Existing contract change.
It's a change in existing contract, right? It's a change in existing contract. So friends, we have understood there are 3 kinds of changes. And if these changes are not part of the original modification, original terms and condition, it will be considered as a modification. What are these 3 kinds of changes? Change in the scope of the lease, change in the consideration, change in the lease term, right? And this I have explained with the help of example in my Excel file as well, correct? So friends, in the last class we discussed when there is a change in the scope of the lease and the change is in line with the market rental, so that is considered as a new contract. We did one example. Then we also did one example to explain whenever there is a change in lease term. You remember we have done the recomputation of the lease liability on the basis of revised interest rate, revised discount rate, 6% to 7%. And there we have discussed how to remeasure the lease liability, how to adjust your change in the lease liability to right of use asset, right? So in the last class, we discussed whenever your lease scope is changing and whenever it is increasing, either by way of lease term or by way of underlying asset. Today, we are going to discuss what happens whenever there is a decrease in the scope of the lease. For example, there is a decrease in the lease term, how to do the accounting for decrease in the lease term. Okay. So this we are going to discuss with the help of one illustration in ICAI study material. Okay. Illustration number 36. So friends, so far What we have covered, we have only covered what we have covered in the last class. Now I'm going to cover the new concept, new illustration in the today's class. If you have any doubt, any question, I'm happy to answer. Then I will start my today's agenda. It's 15 minutes.
Good morning, sir. Anu Sharma here. Sir,
Yeah,
I have
good
a
morning,
doubt
Anu.
regarding modification concept.
Regarding
Modification concept. Sir, we did
modification
a
concept.
question number 34. Yes, sir. In which there was a change in the rate that was 6 to 7%. I got confused that while calculating the lease liability before modification, we calculate the lease liability and also the interest till modification. But I want to ask why after modification we have not calculated the interest.
We have not.
Calculated the interest.
In which
Because
question we have not calculated the interest? Sorry, I haven't understood your
this is
query.
question number 34 of the institute module, in which the rent was increased from 6% to 7%.
This one which I have covered in the
Yes,
last
sir.
class. This
Yes,
is
sir.
what you're talking about.
Yes, sir.
So Anu, let me take you on the Excel file where I have solved this question. Correct. So illustration number 34. Okay. So Anu, if you see this question, what was that question? The initial lease term was 10 year. Lease payment was 1 lakh. Discount rate was 6%. The revised discount rate was 7%. The modification was happening at the end of 6 years, right? Or at the beginning of year 7. The total lease term was 14. What I have done, first step, I have computed the right of use asset, which is nothing, present value of lease payment. So my lease liability comes out at 736,009. My opening ROU and lease liability is this one, right? Then I have prepared the lease liability schedule for on the basis of original lease term. I have prepared the lease liability schedule, right? And there I have computed what is my lease liability at the end of 6 year. At the end of 6 year, correct? It is clear as of now?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So I have computed my lease liability at the end of 6 years. Then I have recomputed my carrying value of ROU asset and lease liability, and then I have recomputed my revised lease liability for the next 8 years on the basis of 7%. That is okay, right?
Yes, sir.
Then I have compared my revised lease liability with the existing lease liability, and whatever change is there, whatever increase is there, I have credited my lease liability and debited my right of use asset. So Anu, first of all, in this question, I have shown you the modification accounting up to the date of modification only, right? Till the time of modification. I have not shown you the accounting subsequent to the modification. Modification के बाद क्या होगा? So after the modification, your revised ROU asset is 545023 and your revised lease liability is 597130, correct? This is your lease liability. This is your revised ROU asset. This revised ROU asset is depreciated over the next 8 years, and this revised lease liability interest will be charged at the rate of 7%. At the rate of 7%. Okay. And liability will be reduced by way of lease payments. Okay. Should I show you that liability schedule also from a 7th year to 14th year?
Yes, sir. Please show.
Okay. So very simple. Depreciation part is okay, na? So for the sake of benefit to everyone, let me write accounting subsequent to modification. Accounting subsequent to modification. ROU asset. Revise ROU asset. Revise ROU asset. This will be depreciated, right? Depreciation. What is the depreciation? This depreciation will be in the next 8 year, year 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Are you clear on this year ना 7 to 14? ये तो clear है ना? 6
Yes.
साल खत्म हो चुके हैं. अब मैं 7th year से काउंटिंग कर रहा हूं. While this is year 7, year 8. This is not 7, 8, 9, 10. This is year 7. Okay. Year 7, year 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. So what is my depreciation? So this total is 8 year depreciation over 8 years period. 8 years. What is my depreciation? Divide by 8. What is my total depreciation? My total depreciation is 545023. What will be my ROU asset at the end of 14th year? What is my ROU asset at the end of total at the end of 14th year? Total
0.
accumulated depreciation. ROU at the end of 14th year. Is this clear, Anu? This was asset accounting. Now let's talk about liability. Okay. This is what you want from me.
Yes, sir.
So let me prepare the liability schedule. See, up to end of the 6th year accounting we have done. Now we have to start with this, correct? हमें कहां से start करना है, अनु? हमें start करना है year 7 से. ठीक है ना?
Yes, sir.
So here instead of 6% I'll write 7%. Why? क्योंकि हमने डिस्काउंटिंग भी रिवाइज लीज लायबिलिटी की 7% पे की है, तो इंटरेस्ट भी 7% पे चार्ज करेंगे. ओके.
Yes, sir.
Year 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. Okay. What is the opening balance? What is the opening balance of revised lease liability?
597,130.
597,130. What is my interest at the rate of 7%? Multiply by 7%. This payment is happening at the end. What is the payment which we have to make? कितनी पेमेंट करनी है? ये रिवाइज लीज लाइबिलिटी का रिवाइज लीज पेमेंट हमने निकाली थी ना, यहाँ पे ये रही 1 lakh rupees every year.
1 lakh.
1 lakh. Okay. What is my closing balance is equal to sum of these three. Okay. Then in the year 8, this will become the opening balance. We will charge interest at the rate of 7%. We will make a payment. The closing balance is this. Then this will become your 9th year opening balance. Interest charge, lease payment, closing balance. ये सबको समझ आ रहा है ना? इसको मैं ड्रैग कर दूं लास्ट तक.
Yes, sir.
Year 14. Anu, is it clear now? So from year 7 to year 14, this is the depreciation in the P&L. From year 7 to year 14, this is the interest cost which will be debited to P&L on the lease liability, right? Every year. Is it fine now?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Okay. Mehak is asking, sir, can I cover all my classes from here if I have not purchased any batch, online classes, etc., etc.? Mehak, yes. So whatever these live virtual classes are there, the faculty is covering the entire syllabus, okay, which is there in the CA final. The faculty is explaining the concept, the faculty is taking the example, and the faculty is also solving the questions from ICAI study material. And the good part, you can watch these videos, you can watch these classes, n number of times for the purpose of revision. Okay. So Mehak, all these classes are available on YouTube. You can, if you are not able to find out the link, you can check with the Board of Studies of ICAI. Okay. You can write the mail to them and they will give you the link. Okay. But all these classes are available on CA YouTube channel. Yes, you are right. Yes, friends, can I go to the next part? Many students have joined so far. So as a protocol, once again, a very good morning. And I can see Many students who are regular students have joined. So Anila, Anu, Tushar, Hemant, Mamta, Mehek, Monica, Niranjan, Nisha, Ginny, Pooja, Smita, Stephen, Usha, Vignesh, and few people are offline like Devraj. So good morning everyone, and let's start today's journey. And today we are going to cover one aspect of lease modification when there is a decrease in the lease term, right? When there is a decrease in the lease term.
Sir,
Okay.
sorry for disturbing. But while we have compared the adjustment to the ROU asset, sir, we have compared the present value of the lease payment after modification and the lease liability before modification. Then can we
Yes.
compare these both?
Can we compare?
These both because the first one that is after modification, it is the present value, and pre-modification it is the lease liability, which includes the interest component also.
Mm-hmm.
So can we compare this both basis?
So, Pooja, you are Pooja, right?
No, sir, Anu.
Anu. So, Anu, what happens? Let's say on the day one, okay? On the day one, you have entered into a contract, right? And you are aware that in the next 10 years, I have to make a certain payments. Let's say 1 lakh rupees every year, correct?
Yes, sir.
Sitting today, you are aware that I have to make a payment of 10 lakh rupees in the next 10 years. What is the present value of these 10 lakh rupees today? Because I'm not going to pay this 10 lakh rupee in one shot. Every year end, I have to pay 1 lakh rupees. So because of the time value of money, right? Because of the time value of money, 1 lakh, which I'm paying after 1 year, and 1 lakh, which I'm paying after in the second year, third year, fourth year, fifth year. So every installment, every payment has a different time value of money because of the time. Okay. So I have computed and I have discounted all those payments and I've computed the present value of the future lease payments, future lease liability. I got a X amount, right? Like in this case, if I go to this particular example, in this case, when initially I have discounted my 10-year lease payment, I got a lease liability of 736,009. Correct?
Yes, sir. I got it now.
You got it now?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Shall I explain further?
No, sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Right. So can I solve this illustration number 36? Lessee enters into a 10-year lease for 5,000 square meter of office space. At the beginning of year 6, lessee and lessor, beginning of year 6 means after end of year 5.
5.
Year 5. Okay. So at the beginning of year 6, lessor and lessee agrees to amend the original lease for the remaining 5 years to reduce the lease payment from 1 lakh per year to 95,000 rupees per year. Okay. So in this question, there is no change in the lease term. There is no change in the scope of the lease. But what is changing?
Consideration.
Consideration is changing. Consideration is changing in this question. Okay. And this consideration is decreasing, right? This consideration is decreasing. So one thing is very clear. Is it a new contract case or is it a change in the existing contract case?
Change in the
Change in the
existing.
existing contract.
Change in the existing contract, right? I'm just reading this question like a student. Okay. So two things have clicked in my mind after reading this 3 line in the examination hall. This question talks about change in consideration. Consideration is decreasing. And this question talks about change in the existing lease contract. Means I have to change my right of use asset and lease liability. Okay. And always I'll start with the lease liability. Always remember, whenever there is a modification, and this modification is a change in the existing contract, you have to recompute your lease liability. And whenever you are recomputing your lease liability, whatever adjustment will come into your lease liability, it will go to your P&L. Sorry. It will go to your right of use asset, right? It will go to right of use asset. Sir, in this case, lease liability will decrease. So lease liability will be debited. So what is the counter impact?
ROU will also decrease.
ROU will also decrease, right? When lease liability was increasing, we have credited lease liability, and what we have debited? ROU asset. But when the lease liability is decreasing, lease liability debit, then what will be credited? ROU will be credited. Sir, let's say we are decreasing lease liability. I'm just taking a hypothetical example. For example, sir, lease liability is decreased by 50,000 rupees, for example. And we have the carrying value of ROU only at 40,000 rupees. Okay. We have carrying value of ROU at 40,000 rupees only, right? So I have debited lease liability by 50,000. I have only 40,000 rupees of ROU. मैं ROU को negative तो नहीं कर सकता ना? Whatever I have, I can credit my ROU only to that extent. Correct? Only to that extent. Okay. So friends, I have debited my lease liability by 50,000. I have credited my ROU by 40,000. Where the remaining 10,000 will go?
It will have a P&L impact.
Any other student?
Impairment, sir.
Where?
Increase liability again to that
Increase
extent.
liability again. The liability is decreasing. How can I increase my liability?
Impairment.
Impairment. But liability cannot be impaired. Asset can be impaired. और asset तो खत्म हो गया. 40,000 का carrying value था.
Reverse depreciation, sir.
Reverse depreciation.
Accumulated.
My God, you guys are evolving a lot of new concepts. So when I say carrying value, इसमें already depreciation आ गया. So
Wait
carrying
and
value का formula होता है cost minus accumulated depreciation. So the differential will go to P&L. The differential will go to P&L. Okay. Lease liability debit, ROU credit to P&L credit. Okay. It will go to other income, P&L. Right. So friends, whenever your lease liability is decreasing, when it is increasing, there is no any problem. जब increase हो रहा है तो कोई problem नहीं है. Lease liability is increased by 1 crore. Debit ROU, credit lease liability. But when you are decreasing lease liability, you have to adjust this decrease in lease liability to ROU asset. But कितना adjust करोगे? जितनी value available है उतना ही करोगे ना. Adjust का मतलब ROU को कम करना. अगर 40,000 carrying value है, can you credit ROU by 50,000? Yes or no?
No.
sir.
If you have a PP, property, plant and equipment, if you have a carrying value of PP for rupees 1 lakh, can you depreciate PP for more than 1 lakh? Of course, no. Of course, no. So an asset cannot be impaired, or an asset cannot be depreciated beyond its carrying value. Right? So in this case, when your liability is decreasing, whenever there is a modification which leads to decrease in liability, the decrease in liability has to adjusted with the ROU asset, right? To the extent it is available. Over and above, it has to charge to the P&L, right? Okay, now let's discuss this question. The interest rate implicit in the lease cannot be readily determined. Lessee's incremental borrowing rate at the commencement date is 6% per annum. Lessee's incremental borrowing rate at the beginning of year 6 is 7% per annum. The annual lease payments are payable at the end of each year. How should the said modification be accounted for? Shall I solve this question on the Excel file? Solve करूं इस question को मैं? Yeah. Okay, so let me take you to the Excel file. Let me take you to the Excel file. Please confirm if my Excel file is visible. Illustration. Yes, is that visible? Excel file? What was the illustration?
Yes,
sir.
Illustration 36. ही थी ना ये illustration. Okay. Now what is given in the question? So let me put some. Let me use these things for my illustration number 36. Initial lease term. There is no change in the lease term. Okay. So lease term is how many years? Lease term is 10 years. No change in the lease term, right? Initial consideration. What was the initial consideration?
1 lakh.
1 lakh. 1 lakh. Okay. What is my revised consideration? So initial consideration means, can I write?
95,000.
So let me write this as an initial lease payment or initial consideration. That is okay. What is my revised? What is my modification? Modification is decrease in consideration. Decrease in consideration. Okay. So lease term to same ही है. Decrease in consideration. And what is the decrease in consideration by 5,000? So it is 95,000. So revise. So decrease in consideration and revised consideration is initial consideration, revised consideration. What is my revised consideration after 5 years? Revised consideration after 5 years is 95,000. 95,000. Let me write one more thing. So modification time. Modification time. What is the modification time? At the end of 5 years. Correct? At the end of 5 years. And what is my discount rate at the commencement date? 6%. My discount rate at the modification date is 7%. Okay. It is 7% now. लिखा है ना, at the beginning of year 6, it is 7%.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the annual lease payment and the lease payment is happening at what time? The lease payment is happening at end of the year.
End of the year.
End of the year. This is very important. Why?
Discounting.
Discounting factor considerably.
Yes. So if it is advance, so there is no discounting for the first year payment. Okay. This was the question. This was the question, my dear friends. Now tell me how to solve this question. Tell me. I don't know how to
Initial
solve this question.
recognition, sir.
Tell me the step. What is my first step?
Present
ROI.
value
We will
decrease.
calculate the present value
First of
before
all,
modification.
on the
Present value
commencement
before
date,
modification.
on the commencement date, I need to compute my what? I need to compute my ROI,
ROI.
lease liability, correct?
Yes,
I
sir.
need to compute my lease liability on the commencement date. Okay. I need to compute my lease liability. How to compute the lease liability on the commencement date? How to compute that?
Present value of 10 years of
Present
lease
value
payment.
of 10 years. Present value of 10 years, correct? So, simple step number 1. What is my step number 1? Calculate present value of lease payment on the basis of original lease term. Right? And how many years are there? I'm just copying some
10
facts.
years.
10 years. What is my lease payment? 1 lakh rupee. What is my discount rate? Even in this question, the discount rate is 6%, correct? वो जो पिछले क्वेश्चन में था ना 34 में, वो सेम ही डिस्काउंट रेट है ना इस क्वेश्चन में भी.
Yes, sir.
So मैंने वही कॉपी कर लिया, ठीक है ना? 1 डिवाइड बाय 1.06. कोई प्रॉब्लम तो नहीं?
No, sir.
This
No,
multiply
sir.
by this. So 736009. 736. I hope this is okay. 736009. I hope
Yes,
this is
sir.
okay.
Yes, sir.
ठीक है ना ये? Okay. So this is my present value of lease payments. What is my accounting entry on the commencement date?
ROU asset debit to
ROU asset debit to
lease
liability.
liability.
Lease liability. Okay. Initial recognition. ROU asset debit to lease liability. Sorry. ROU asset debit to lease liability. Shall I prepare the lease liability schedule also? Because step number 2, I need to prepare the lease liability schedule on the basis of original lease terms, correct? On the basis of original lease terms. Just okay. Opening balance, interest at the rate of 6%, lease payments and closing balance. Year 1, 2, 3, 4, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So I am doing the calculation as per the original terms and condition. I am not aware about the changes. Okay, because I am sitting on day 1. I am sitting on day 1, right? I am sitting on day 1. I don't know what will happen after 5 years. I don't know. So what is my opening balance? 736,009 is my opening balance. What is my interest? 6% is my interest. And lease payment is minus 1 lakh. Minus 1 lakh means I'm making a payment. This is my sum. 680,169. This will become the opening balance. This is the interest payment. This is the lease payment. This is my closing balance. Friends, this is how my lease liability will be computed. Right? Friends, when I reach to the year 5, what I found? I have found that my
Closing.
terms and conditions are changing. At the end of 5 year, my closing lease liability is 421,236, right? When I reach to the end of the 5 year, my closing lease liability, carrying value of lease liability in the books of accounts is 421,236. And what is my carrying value of ROU asset? ROU asset की carrying value क्या होगी?
Less
After
5
5
years
year
of
depreciation.
depreciation.
Step number 3. See, I am going with the same steps. जो मैंने आपको last class में पढ़ाया था ना, मैं same steps copy कर रहा हूँ. Okay. Same steps I am copying. Step number 3, calculate carrying value of ROU asset and lease liability at the time of modification, that is end of year 5. पिछले क्वेश्चन में year 6 था, इसमें year 5 है. At the end of year 5. So my opening balance at commencement date 736,009. My lease liability is same. What is my accumulated depreciation? What is my accumulated depreciation? This divide by 10 multiply by 5. Right? So this is my ROU asset. What is my lease liability? What is my closing lease liability at the end of 5 year?
421 to
421,236. Can you see my ROU asset and lease liability was same on the commencement date, but at the end of 5 year, my ROU asset is less than my lease liability. Why? जब पहले दिन सेम था तो अभी अलग अलग क्यों है वैल्यू? Why it is different?
Just
different.
created.
Here equally we are taking depreciation. There we are taking as on the cumulative
So
depreciation.
basically what we are doing, the ROU asset is depreciated on a straight line basis. Okay. But the lease liability, in the initial period, the interest will be higher. In the future period, the interest will go down, right? So lease liability, on the lease liability, the interest has to be computed on the closing balance of the lease liability, right? So it is not static. It is not same. And hence there is a difference in the carrying value of lease asset and lease liability. I mean to say ROU asset and lease liability, there is a difference. Okay. Due to the difference, you remember I was talking about whenever there is a decrease in the lease liability, you have to adjust with ROU asset. Okay. And probably if your ROU asset is not available, which will cover your decrease in lease liability, the differential will go to P&L. So when this situation will happen? This situation will happen when your ROU asset is typically very less than the lease liability, right? और ये ROU asset और lease liability में difference तो होता ही होता है. अगर difference नहीं होता तो ये P&L की situation कभी arise होती ही नहीं. Correct? Okay. Friends, now what to do? So we have reached to year 5. We have closed the year end 5. My carrying value of ROU asset and lease liability is there. Friends, what to do now? क्या कर रहे हैं हम?
Revised
Difference
value of
between
lease
the
liability we have to calculate.
We have to calculate
Lease liability present value
present value of lease liability, revised lease
for the
liability.
remaining 5 years.
Okay, so calculate revised lease liability on the basis of revised terms at the time of modification, correct? ये step है ना? Step number 4, calculate revised lease liability on the basis of revised terms at the time of modification, that is start of year 6.
6.
है ना? Year 5 खत्म हो गया, that is start of year 6. तो क्या करूंगा अब? कैसे निकालूं?
95,000
payment
revise lease payment की present value at the rate of 7% I will calculate.
Why 7%? Why not 6%?
So consideration change हुआ है.
So the cash flows are changing, right? The consideration is changed. So when the consideration is changing, for example, if you go to the bank and take a home loan, right? Are you aware about this fact? So if you take a home loan of, let's say, 50 lakh rupees or 30 lakh rupees, the rate of interest would be different. If you take a home loan of 1 crore rupees, the rate of interest will be different. Are you aware about this fact?
Yes, sir.
Yes.
So it means when your cash flows are changing, right? So your rate of interest will also change. Your rate of interest will also change. Okay. So in this case, your cash flows are changing, and hence you have to take a revised discount rate, which was negotiated, or revised incremental borrowing rate of the lessee at the time of the modification. At the time of modification. So what is my revised discount rate? What is my revised discount rate? It is 7%.
7%.
Revised discount rate is 7%. Okay. So year what is my year? Year number 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, right? Year 6, 7, year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. ठीक है ना? ये year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 5 year. और यहां से काउंट में क्या आएगा? 1, 2, 3, 4,
1, 2, 3.
5. लीज पेमेंट कितनी है?
95,000.
95,000.
95,000. Okay. What is my present value factor? 1 divided by 1.07.
7.
Okay. Divide by 1.07. Okay. What is my present value of lease payment? This multiply by this. Okay, so what is my revised lease liability? 389,519. This is my revised lease liability. This is my revised lease liability. What is this? This is revised lease liability on the date of modification. Revised lease liability on the date of modification. अब क्या करूं? Compare करूं?
Difference between liabilities
Yes.
value.
So compare revised lease liability and the existing lease liability on the date of modification. यही करना है मुझे. Compare करता हूं. Step number 5. What is my revised lease liability? 389,519. What was my existing lease liability?
421 to 36.
So how much is the decrease? How much is the decrease in liability? Decrease in liability. 31,718 is a decrease in liability. क्या करूं अब इस डिक्रीज का? लीज लाइबिलिटी को तो क्रेडिट, लीज लाइबिलिटी को डेबिट करना, क्रेडिट क्या करूं?
ROU
ROU
asset.
asset.
Step number 6, adjust ROU asset with change in the lease liability. Same, I'm copying the same steps I'm copying from the last class. Adjust ROU asset. What is my existing ROU asset? What is my existing ROU asset? My existing ROU asset is कितना था? 368,004. यही था ना? 368,004.
Yes, sir.
What is my decrease in liability? 31718. What is my revised ROU asset? 336287. Correct? 336287. So friends, accounting entry. What is the accounting entry? ROU asset to lease liability. Correct? ROU asset to lease liability.
No, sir, reverse.
Reverse.
Liability to
Lease liability account debit to ROU asset. Very good. To ROU asset credit. How much? Minus 31718. Okay. So you can see this ROU asset will be credited and lease liability will be debited. So the adjustment has to happen with the ROU asset. Now, what is my revised numbers? What is my revised number at the end of the 5th year? Final. What is my final number? Revised ROU asset. कितना है revised ROU asset? 336287. Revised lease liability कितनी है? 389519. राइट. इसका क्या करूंगा 336287 का? Subsequently ये जीरो कैसे होगा?
Remaining
this will be
useful
zero?
life पे depreciate.
Depreciate over the remaining life of how many years? 5 years.
5 years.
Anu, how this revised lease liability will be zero?
Interest calculation.
Anu, how this will be zero?
So we will calculate the depreciation.
No, I'm talking about revised lease liability. Add interest at the rate of 7% and reduce by the lease payments and reduce by lease payment. ये मैं दोबारा से lease payment का schedule दिखाऊं आप लोगों को? Should I show you the lease payment schedule at the rate of 7% again? Should
No,
I show
sir.
you?
Yes, sir.
Yes. Okay. So depreciation is very clear, na? Depreciation is very clear. So
Yes, sir.
again, I am writing the same thing. Accounting subsequent to modification, right? Accounting subsequent to modification. Accounting subsequent to what is my revised ROU asset 336287? What is my revised lease liability 389519? Okay. Now my depreciation. How much is the depreciation every year? Depreciation कितने साल में? 5 years में बचे हुए इतने साल ही हैं. What is my depreciation? Year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Can you help me quickly? What is the depreciation? Divide by 5. What is my total accumulated depreciation? What is my total accumulated depreciation? Accumulated itself is total. Accumulated depreciation. What is my ROU asset at the end of the 5th year?
0.
zero.
ROU at the end of
10th year.
10th year.
Here.
10th year. इसका मतलब कोई नहीं सो रहा, सब सुन रहे हैं, right? 336. Okay. Now revised lease liability. I think you guys become expert in depreciation calculation and revised lease liability. In my last 3 classes and today's 1 hour class, so I have done so many calculations so many times. Lease liability computation, year opening balance. Clear है ना ये? या नहीं है अभी भी clear?
Yes, sir. Clear.
Clear है?
In mind.
Clear in mind. Very good. Thanks for clarifying. Clear तो सबको होता है, but in mind is important. Interest at the rate of 7%. Okay. Year 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Opening balance क्या है? 389519. Interest at the rate of 7%. Lease payment कौन सी होगी? What is my lease payment?
95,000.
95,000, वेरी गुड, 95,000। यहां से लिंक कर दूं मैं इसको, रिवाइज कंपटीशन आपने की थी ना, ये रही, राइट। सो आप अगले 5 साल में कितनी पेमेंट करोगे? 95,000 की करोगे। ओके, व्हाट इज माय क्लोजिंग बैलेंस? इक्वल टू सम ऑफ ऑल these 3 items. By 27 it will be added and 95 it will be deducted. Then interest, and your closing balance. Then again interest, your closing balance, opening balance, interest, closing balance, opening balance, interest, closing balance. समझ में आ गया? Your lease liability
Yes,
will
sir.
become 0.
Yes, sir.
अकाउंटिंग एंट्री भी बताऊं हर साल की? बताऊं अकाउंटिंग एंट्री या छोड़ दूं?
No, sir, no, sir. It's
No?
fine.
Anyone who wants to draft me the accounting entry, I'm okay to draft. Any student who want me to write the accounting entry, if there is even one student, I'll write those accounting entries. चलो कर देते हैं एक बार, ठीक है? One student is asking. Accounting entries. Depreciation की accounting entry फटाफट बताओ. Depreciation to
Depreciation account debit to ROU.
Accumulated.
debit to accumulated depreciation.
Depreciation.
Okay? To accumulated depreciation. अगर आप एग्जाम में आरओयू भी करके आओगे तो गलत नहीं होगा, ठीक है? बट टेक्निकली क्या होता है? सो ग्रॉस ब्लॉक, एक्यूमुलेटेड डेप्रिसिएशन, देन नेट ब्लॉक, राइट? इवन द कैरिंग वैल्यू फॉर्मूला इज कॉस्ट माइनस accumulated depreciation minus accumulated impairment losses is equal to carrying value. So रियल लाइफ में भी ऐसे ही चलता है, आप डेप्रिसिएशन को एक्यूमुलेट करते जाते हो, राइट? और नेट ब्लॉक में हमेशा लेस करके दिखाते हो, ऐसे ही करते हैं ना?
Yes, sir.
आपने
Yes,
देखा
sir.
होगा ना, क्लाइंट प्लेस पे आपने देखा है ऐसा?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so this is accounting entry for depreciation being, सर नरेशन भी लिख दो, ठीक है जी, being ROU depreciated. ये देखो नरेशन भी लिख दी मैंने. ओके, ईयर 5, सॉरी ईयर 6, ईयर 6, ईयर 7, 8, 9, 10, ईयर 8, ईयर 9 एंड ईयर 10. ओके, क्या होगा डेप्रिसिएशन? सेम ही होगा ना डेप्रिसिएशन तो?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
कॉपी कर लूं मैं इसको, ये होगी टोटल, आपका टोटल इम्पैक्ट इन पीएनएल, टोटल इम्पैक्ट इन पीएनएल. ये सब्सिक्वेंट टू मॉडिफिकेशन है ये अकाउंटिंग, ठीक है ना? ये मॉडिफिकेशन से पहले की अकाउंटिंग नहीं है, ये मॉडिफिकेशन के बाद की अकाउंटिंग है. कहीं आप बोलो टोटल, सर टोटल इम्पैक्ट इन पीएनएल तो 10 ईयर का है. मैं बात कर रहा हूं, देखो लिखा भी है मैंने, मुझे पता है आप लोग कहोगे सर आप गलत कह रहे हो, देखो इसलिए मैंने लिख दिया अकाउंटिंग सब्सिक्वेंट टू मॉडिफिकेशन. ओके,
सर
यस मैडम.
टोटल इम्पैक्ट इन पीएनएल में डबल फिगर आई है, कोई एक ही डिलीट कर दो.
डबल आ गई?
मतलब डेप्रिसिएशन की भी टोटल आपने लिखी है और नीचे एक्यूमुलेटेड डेप्रिसिएशन भी लिख दिया है.
ओके, स्मार्ट स्टूडेंट. इंटरेस्ट, व्हाट इज द अकाउंटिंग एंट्री फॉर इंटरेस्ट? इंटरेस्ट,
इंटरेस्ट डेबिट टू लीज लायबिलिटी.
interest expense debit to lease liability. Debit to lease liability. Credit. Okay, what is my interest? ये मैंने अभी कैलकुलेट किया. I have calculated this interest 27,000. Okay, 22,000, 17,000, 12,000, 6,200. And what is the total impact in the P&L? Again, 85481. And this is your credit entries, right? And you can see the difference. Every year depreciation is 67,000, but your interest is the decreasing trend, 27, 22, 17, 12, 62. Okay, what is the next entry? Lease liability to account debit to bank account. to bank. What is the payment? 95,000. 95,000. Okay. Same payment. P&L impact कितना होगा इसका total, right? Right? What is the P&L impact of this transaction, lease liability to bank?
Sir, why will this go to P&L?
Why this will go to the P&L? That I was asking that question. Okay. No P&L impact. We are paying the liability. Okay. So the total P&L impact is in the 5 year after modification is 421,768. 421,768. Okay. I hope it is clear. I hope it is clear to
Yes, sir.
everyone.
Yes, sir. Crystal clear.
Yes. This is clear. Very good. Very good. Okay. So we have covered illustration number 36 also. And friends, now we have understood the meaning of modification. Friends, what is your feedback? Have you understood this Ind AS 116 so far? Yeah. Have you understood this Ind AS 116 so far?
Yes,
Whatever
sir.
we have
Clear in
covered.
mind.
Yes, sir.
How do you find this standard? Very complex, very difficult, or easy? Interesting?
Interesting.
Interesting, sir.
It is very interesting. It is very interesting. Okay. So let me tell you, in May 2024, there is 100% chances that the question will come from this standard. At least 8 to 10 marks. There is 100% chance.
25, sir.
May 25.
May 25. Yes, May 25. Okay, 100% chances. And I can tell you with my experience. This standard, again, I'm repeating, this standard is important for becoming a chartered accountant and after becoming a chartered accountant, right? This standard is important for the lifetime. You just need to understand the concept. And while this is a live virtual classes organized by ICAI, and you can see ICAI has given a sufficient amount of time, right? We are covering this standard in 15-16 hours in 5 classes. And we have discussed all the concepts in detail, be it identified asset, be it right to control the use of an asset, be it inception date, commencement date, initial direct cost, interest rate implicit in the lease, incremental borrowing rate, right? Right of use asset initial measurement and recognition, subsequent measurement, modification, low value leases, short-term leases, right? We have covered everything in detail with the help of examples and with the help of illustrations. Yes or no?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
I believe you guys are well versed with the concepts now, right? Lot of illustrations we have, lot of illustrations we have solved. And every time, whatever is given in the question, we are solving beyond that. For example, as per the request of Anu, I have solved this illustration number 34, which was not required in the question, accounting subsequent to modification, correct? So on the request of other student, and just to more clarify, I have again solved the accounting subsequent to modification, right? This will revise your concepts, okay? This will revise your concepts. Very good. Great, Ginny. Ginny is saying, sir, 8 to 10 marks पक्के हैं हमारे, हम ये concepts कभी नहीं भूलेंगे. Very good. Okay, now let's move to the next concepts. The next concept is lessor accounting. Friends, now we are moving to the next concept. And before that, let me just give you a highlights of this thing. What is the highlight? So just a minute. Yes. So friends, whenever there is a new lease contract, increase in scope is equal to increase in consideration basis, whenever there is an increase in scope, which is increase in consideration basis fair market rental, means your scope is increasing and your rent is also increasing. And that rent is on the basis of market value. So it will always be a new lease contract. It will always be a new lease contract. But whenever there's an increase in scope, but it is not at a fair value of the rentals, or there is only increase in lease term, or there is only change in consideration, in that case, you have to remeasure lease liability on the date of modification and adjust ROU asset. Friends, what happens when there is a decrease in lease term or decrease in scope? Either there is a decrease in lease term or there is a decrease in scope. When your lease term is decreasing or your scope is decreasing, in that case, you have to de-recognize lease liability and ROU asset partially. Okay. And the impact, if there is any over and above impact, that impact has to be taken to P&L. You remember, as I told you, you are decreasing lease liability and you have to adjust this decrease to the ROU asset. For example, you don't have sufficient ROU to cover the decrease in lease liability, then the differential will go to P&L. This is what
P&L.
given, right? So I have given two summary, lease modification summary. This I have copy pasted from ICAI study material. This one I have just given you a glimpse. This is drafted by me. Okay. So whatever modification summary you will like, you can just look at that and you can keep that for your revisions. Okay. Whatever you like.
So one small doubt, sir. There was one case you said the percentage that discounting will not change in modification, if I remember. But is there so?
If there is a,
when you were explaining in the last class, you said if there is some change, we will not change the discounting factor. We will continue the same beginning discounting factor. Which was that case that we will take the same discounting
so
factor?
only scope is changing, but consideration in lease term is not changing. Right? Your scope is changing, but your consideration in lease term is not changing. Right? In that case, you are not required to change your discount rate.
In
So
case,
typically,
for example, I may take 4 rooms I was having, I'll take the 5th room, but the term and the consideration remain same.
Yes.
No. But in the books also, actually, there will not be any change, right?
Yes.
Is that I have to add in?
Yeah, even in the books, there is no any change. Okay. So friends, now let's come back to the lessor accounting. And friends, I will, after finishing this Ind AS 116, I will also do one complex question at the end of the entire session. Okay. So lessor accounting. First of all, if you compare the lease accounting in Ind AS 116 with the earlier concepts in India, which was AS 19. In AS 19, we had operating lease and finance lease, correct? We had operating lease and finance lease. You all are aware about operating lease, finance lease, na? Purane wale standard mein we had operating lease, we had finance lease. What is meant by operating lease and finance lease? When the risk and rewards are not getting transferred to the lessee, it is an operating lease. From the lessee perspective. When the risk and rewards are getting transferred to the lessee, it is a finance lease in the books of the lessee. So what lessee was doing in the old standard, the lessee, if it is an operating lease, the lessee is not capitalizing any asset, not crediting any liability. Simple. Whenever the lessee has to pay the rental, lessee was debiting rental and lessee was crediting bank. Simple. Expense to bank. But if it is a finance lease in the books of the lessee, lessee was capitalizing finance lease asset and crediting finance lease liability. This is what lessee was doing. So friends, if I talk about accounting in the books of the lessee, in Ind AS 116, the lessee accounting in Ind AS 116 is more like a finance lease accounting. सही है ना? एसेट को डेबिट करते हैं, लाइबिलिटी को क्रेडिट करते हैं, यही होता है ना? इट इज मोर लाइक अ फाइनेंस लीज अकाउंटिंग. कौन सी फाइनेंस लीज अकाउंटिंग? जो हम पुराने स्टैंडर्ड्स में पढ़ते थे, एएस में पढ़ते थे. So in lease accounting, in the books of the lessee, there is no concept of operating lease and finance lease. There is a single lease model where you have to capitalize your right of use asset and you have to credit your lease liability. This is what we have understood. This is what we have studied so far, right? So friends, just remember one thing. Whatever I am capitalizing in the books of the lessee, what I am capitalizing? I am capitalizing right of use asset. Right of use. Because I am using the asset, I am getting a right to use the asset, and hence I am capitalizing the right of use asset. Let's say I am a owner of a flat in Mumbai. Anyone who belongs to Mumbai in this class? Anyone who belongs to Mumbai? Okay. Let's say Rahul belongs to Mumbai. I have a flat in Kandivali in Mumbai, and the cost of the flat is 2 crore rupees. What is the average life of the flat? Can anyone tell me the life of the flat?
20 years.
20 years, let's say 20 years. Okay. So the cost of the flat is 2 crore. I am the owner. I am the lessor. See, in my books of accounts, how this flat will come in my books of account?
Asset, sir.
Asset, but kaun sa asset? Which asset? It is like an investment property. It is like a PP or investment property, right? And it will be at what value? 2 crore. Life is 20 years. I have given this asset on a lease basis to Rahul. Now Rahul is a lessee, I am the lessor. And I have given this asset on a lease basis to Rahul for 5 years. And I'm charging a rent of rupees 10 lakh per annum. Right. So how much rent I am taking from Rahul? How much rent?
10 lakh.
10 lakh rupees per annum means in 5 years it is 50 lakh. Correct? What accounting Rahul will do? What accounting Rahul will do? Rahul is the lessee. Lessee अपनी books में क्या accounting करेगा?
Present value of that 50 lakhs.
Present value of this 50 lakh. So Rahul will capitalize a right of use asset. Right. So Rahul is capitalizing right of use asset. And what I have capitalized? I have capitalized an investment property, an asset, right? At the value of what? At the value of 2 crore, which is the cost of my flat. And Rahul is capitalizing at 50 lakh rupees, present value of 50 lakh rupees. Friends, if Rahul is recognizing an asset, what do you think? Should I de-recognize my asset? क्या करूं मैं? de-recognize कर दूं उस asset को, क्योंकि राहुल recognize कर रहा है उस asset को.
No, sir.
Not. Why not? Why not?
Because you are the risk of the asset is with you. Risk and reward.
Because yes. So I am the owner of the asset. I am not transferring the entire risk and reward for the lifetime of the asset. So the life of the asset is 20 years, and I have given this asset to Rahul only for 5 years. After 5 years, he will return this asset to me, and I will use this asset as per my own whims and fancies for the next 15 years. I am holding this asset for next 15 years, right? Correct?
Yes,
I am
sir.
holding this asset for next 15 years. So Rahul is not capitalizing flat. Rahul is not capitalizing building. Rahul is capitalizing a right, which is given by me to him for using the asset. Correct? And hence, a lessee who is getting a right to use the asset, he has to capitalize right of use asset in all the leases, and hence there is a single lease model. Correct? But friends, in lessor accounting, like myself, I am the owner of the asset. In the lessor accounting, right? In the lessor accounting, if somebody who is my lessee and who is capitalizing the asset, shall I de-recognize the asset? Answer is no. It means from the lessor perspective, the operating lease and finance lease concept still exists from the lessor perspective. So friends, अभी तक हमने जो भी पढ़ा वो लेसी अकाउंटिंग पढ़ी. It was accounting in the books of the lessees, right? So what I am going to learn, what we will going to learn, we will going to learn lessor accounting. And friends, there is a concept of operating lease and finance lease from the lessor perspective. From the lessee perspective, there was no concept of operating lease and finance lease under Ind AS 116. But from the lessor perspective, there is a concept of operating lease and finance lease under Ind AS 116. And what is a difference between operating lease and finance lease? If the risk and reward will be transferred to the lessee, it will be a finance lease in the books of the lessor. And if the risk and reward is not transferred to the lessee, it is an operating lease in the books of the lessor. And whenever it is an operating lease, lessor will continue the asset, continue to show the asset in its books of accounts. But whenever it is a finance lease, lessor will de-recognize the asset and recognize the finance lease receivable. Okay. So friends, when it can be considered as a finance lease, standard has given some examples, some indicators. While the classification of finance lease and operating leases, finance lease is a lease when the lessor transfers substantially all the risk and rewards incidental to the ownership of the asset. In operating lease, lessor does not transfer risk and reward incidental to the ownership of an asset. In standard, there are some indicator examples are given for the finance lease when it can be said that the substantial risk and reward have been transferred. Ownership. The lease transfer ownership of the asset to the lessee by the end of the lease term. One of the indicator is if the lessor and lessee has entered into an agreement and there is a clause which says that the ownership will be transferred at the end of the lease term, right? So this is an indicator of finance lease. It means the risk and reward will be substantially transferred to the lessee. It is the lessee who is using the asset. Once the lease term will be expired, the asset will be transferred in the name of the lessee. Purchase option is available, right? Friends, typically in finance lease contract, there is a purchase option which is available at a nominal value. For example, I have a flat in Kandivali, 2 crore rupees the value. So I have told Rahul that, okay, Rahul, you can take this flat from me at for 15 years on a lease basis. After 15 years, you can purchase this flat at a cost of 25 lakh. So the exercise price is lesser than the market value. It is at a nominal price and it is reasonably certain that the lessee is going to avail the purchase option. Lease term. Lease term is for the major part of the economic life of the asset, right? Even though the title is not transferred. But for example, the life of the asset is 20 years and the lessee is taking that asset for more than 75% of the life. Friends, major part of the life is not defined in Ind AS or IFRS, it is defined in US GAAP. So normally more than 75% of the life is taken as a major part of the economic life. Present value of minimum lease payment. Friends, the present value of the minimum lease payment should be substantially equal to the fair value of the asset. For example, in 15 years, so I have given an option to Rahul that please purchase my flat after 15 years at 25 lakh rupees. Friends, you remember the concept of lease payment. What was the concept of lease payment? What was included in the lease payment?
Present value of lease liabilities. And if the purchase option is there, that we will also consider the present value of that.
Lease payment is equal to what? Fixed lease payment plus in substance fixed lease payment plus variable lease payment on the basis of index or rate plus exercise price if the purchase option is available, correct? Plus termination penalty plus residual value given by the residual guarantee by the lessee, or from the lessor perspective, anyone, any party, okay, any third party as well. Friends, in this case, the 15-year lease payment plus exercise price of 25 lakh. If this present value of lease payment is substantially equivalent to the fair value of the asset, इसका क्या मतलब बना? present value of lease payment is substantially equivalent to the fair value of the asset. इसका मतलब बना जो आज इस एसेट की मार्केट वैल्यू है लेसोर उससे रिकवर कर रहा है, लेसोर लेसी से जो फेयर वैल्यू एसेट की पूरी रिकवर कर रहा है। इसका क्या मतलब बना? इसका मतलब बना कि लेसोर ने लेसी को एसेट बेच दिया है। इट इज जस्ट लाइक अ फंडिंग होती है ना, आपने लोन आज ले लिया, अब आप विथ इंटरेस्ट पे करते रहोगे, राइट? सो वन ऑफ द इंडिकेटर इज प्रेजेंट वैल्यू ऑफ मिनिमम लीज पेमेंट इज इक्विवेलेंट टू द फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ द लीज एसेट, और the asset is of such a specialized nature which the lessor has manufactured, lessor has customized, lessor has purchased only for the purpose of the lessee, only for the purpose of use by the lessee, right? So these are the 5 indicators which indicate the transfer of risk and reward, and which indicate, these are the indicator of the finance lease contract. So friends, from the lessor perspective, the concept of operating lease and finance lease still exists, right? From the lessee perspective, there is no concept of operating lease and finance lease under Ind AS 116. And why the concept of finance lease and operating lease exists from the perspective of lessor? Because if lessor has not transferred the risk and reward to the lessee, it means lessor continues with the asset. Lessor will use the asset in future. Lessor will earn the future economic benefit, and hence it is kind of an operating lease. It is an operating lease where the lessor will continue to recognize the asset. Lessor will continue to show the asset in its books of accounts. Okay, is that clear? But if in scenario that, so Vinay is asking, but if in scenario that fair value, future rentals of fair value of building, and if we discount the rentals, then it will always match in cash. So in case of future cash flow approach. So Vinay, the standard talks about substantially. Substantially means, for example, the fair value of the asset is 1 crore rupees. Market value of asset is 1 crore, right? And when I'm doing my present value of future lease rentals, it is coming out at 90 lakh rupees. Even then, in this case, it will considered as a finance lease indicator, and lessor has to de-recognize the asset and recognize the lease receivable, right? Hemant is asking, sir, the asset will not be doubly counted both in the books of the lessee and lessor. Hemant, what I've explained now, when I was explaining the lessee and lessor accounting, the single lease model and this model, and when I was explaining that I have purchased an asset of rupees 2 crore. I have a flat of rupees 2 crore and I have given it on a 5-year lease to Rahul. So there are two different assets. What Rahul is capitalizing the rights which I have given it to him, and he is paying me for those rights. And hence, Rahul is not recognizing the building. Rahul is recognizing the right of use of that building for 5 years. Rahul is recognizing the rights which I have given to him. What I am recognizing? I am recognizing an asset which I have purchased and which I'll use for 20 years. Okay. So I have recognized at 2 crore and Rahul has to recognize at present value of 50 lakh rupees. Correct. So there are two different assets. Okay. So Vinay, major part of the economic life, major means more than 75% of the total life, right? Major means more than 75%. Substantial means more than 90%. Okay. 90% or more. Okay. Friends, it's 8:25 now. Let's have a 10 minutes break and then I will explain the lessor accounting with the help of examples and illustration. Okay. Let's have a 10 minutes break. Ashok ji, break. Yeah. So let me take you on the Excel file. I hope my Excel file is visible. Is it visible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So just hold on for a minute. Yes. So friends, let me explain you the lessor accounting. While lessor accounting is same what we have learned in AS 19, but let me explain here lessor accounting. So the accounting depend on the classification. The lessor accounting, if I talk about the lessor accounting, the accounting depends on the classification. In lessee accounting, there was no any classification. Every lease is a single lease model. There is a single lease model. So if there is an identified asset, there is a right to control the use of an asset. So you need to capitalize right of use asset and you need to credit lease liability, correct? I have a question here. Let's say, in few scenario, there is upfront lease payments. There is a upfront lease payments. Let's say a lessee has taken a land from a authority, from a government authority for a period of 10 years, right? And government authority asked a upfront payment of rupees 10 lakh. And on the commencement date, lessee has paid 10 lakh rupees to the government authority as an upfront payment for the lease rentals. In this case, what is your ROU asset and lease liability? There is no future lease payments. Whatever is there, everything has been paid on the commencement date. Anyone who wants to attempt this question? Right or wrong, doesn't matter. Anyone who wants to attempt?
So the cost is the
It
ROE,
might
sir.
lag as over the period, over the term period of the lease agreement. So.
Okay, so Hemant is saying ROE is equal to initial payment. That is what you guys are also saying?
No.
Yes, sir.
I'm saying we would probably like how we depreciate over the lifetime of the asset. We could I'm not getting the right term, but we could recognize it over the lifetime. For the 10 lakhs would be taken over the lifetime of the asset.
No, what is the first accounting entry? I'm asking. So at the commencement date, what is the accounting entry which you need to pass in the books of accounts?
Initial payment only, sir.
Initial payment?
Initial payment is to be considered as the ROU.
ROU asset. So are you saying accounting entry is ROU asset account debit to bank?
Yes, sir, because we can't take any present value of future cash outflows because outflow is on the day one.
Yes, yes, very good. So basically, if you see, ROU consists of your present value of future lease payment, but there is no future lease payment in this case. There is upfront payment plus ROU also consists of amount which you have already paid on or before the commencement date, right? So ROU consists of the amount which you are going to pay in future, you have to take it to the present value. But the amount which you have already paid as an advance or you have paid on the commencement date, this is also you are going to be added to the value of ROU, right? So while your lease liability will be zero, why? Because you have already paid, but your ROU will be debited by the amount which you have already paid, the upfront payment. So the accounting entry is ROU account debit to lease liability 10 lakh, lease liability to bank 10 lakh on the same date, right? So generally what happened, if the question would be tricky and some part of question, if it is come like this, that the entire payment has been made on commencement date. The entire payment has been made on commencement date. In that case, don't forget to capitalize ROU while your lease liability will be 0, but don't forget to capitalize your ROU. Okay, right? So because ROU is equal to present value of future lease payment plus what? Amount already paid, lease rent already paid on or before the commencement date plus initial direct cost plus provision for asset retirement obligation or site dismantling obligation, right? Yes, so this is what I want to discuss. So coming to the lessor accounting. Lessor accounting means accounting in the books of the lessor. Accounting in the books of lessor. Accounting in the books of the lessor. Friends, as I told you, as far as lessor accounting is concerned, right? So in the lessor accounting, the concept of operating lease and finance lease still exists, right? What is the operating lease? Where the risk and reward has not been transferred. What is the finance lease? Where the risk and reward has been substantially transferred. Okay. What are the indicators which indicate that risk and reward will be substantially transferred, or indicator of finance lease? For example, the lease, the ownership will be transferred at the end of the lease term. When lease term will expire, the ownership will be transferred to the lessee. Or there is a purchase option, and this purchase option is at an exercise price which is much lesser than the market value. Okay, it means it is at a nominal price. Or the lessee is using the asset for major part of the economic life. The lessee is using the asset for the major part of the economic life, means more than 75% of the life. Or the present value of future lease payments, is substantially equals to the market value of the asset on the commencement date. Or the asset is of a specialized nature. If these indicators satisfy the criteria, then it is a finance lease. Otherwise, it is an operating lease. Okay, it's a matter of judgment. It's a matter of facts and circumstances. Friends, if it is an operating lease, the accounting is different. If it is a finance lease, the accounting is different. Now, what is the accounting we need to understand? Okay, what is the accounting we need to understand? So let's understand with the help of a question. Okay, lessor accounting we are going to discuss. And in the lessor accounting, we are going to discuss the operating lease accounting. Operating lease accounting. Accounting in the books of the lessor. Operating lease. Right? Operating lease. The lease can be classified as an operating lease or finance lease. The lease can be classified as an operating lease or finance lease. Okay. In the books of the lessor, depending on the risk and rewards, whether transferred or not. Okay. So question, A Limited is a lessor who leases the building to B Limited for a period of 3 years. The lease rental is 10,000 rupees per annum and to be increased by 10% every year. The life of the building is 20 years and the cost of the building is 20 lakhs. What is the classification in accounting in case of a lessor? What is the classification in accounting in case of a lessor? Okay.
Operating lease.
Operating lease. Why? Because the risk and reward has not been substantially transferred, right? In this question, you can see that in this question, you can see that. Friend, just give me a minute. There is some problem in my camera. Just give me a minute. Yeah. So this is a operating lease because number one, the ownership is not getting transferred at the end of the lease term. Number two, the asset is not used for the major part of the economic life. Number three, the present value of the lease payment.
Okay.
Number three, the present value of the lease payment is not substantially equivalent to the market value of the asset, right? The cost of the building is 20 lakhs. The asset is not of a specialized nature and the purchase option is also not available. Okay. So this is a operating lease. What is the classification accounting in case of a lessor? This is a operating lease. Okay. Solution. Classification of the lease is equal to operating lease in the books of the lessor. Operating lease in the books of the lessor. So what accounting lessor is doing? Lessor has purchased this building. What is the accounting entry lessor has passed when the lessor has purchased this building?
Building account debit to bank.
Building investment property account debit, right? Investment property क्यों है ये? Why it is an investment property?
You are earning on
Because it is given on rent. The purpose is to earn rental. Building investment property account debit to bank account, correct? Lessor is the owner of this property, correct? Right. What is the value? What is the value? 20 lakhs is the value.
3 lakh.
20 lakhs. 20 lakh is the value. Now what lessor will do? What lessor will do?
recognize the lease received, lease payment received and depreciation.
Sorry.
Depreciation and the lease payment received income.
Depreciation and the lease income. So first of all, let's talk only about the property. Okay. So lessor will charge the depreciation because lessor is the owner and lessor will use this building for 20 years. So lessor will charge depreciation, right? So lessor will charge depreciation. What is the accounting entry? Depreciation to depreciation account debit to
Accumulated depreciation.
accumulated depreciation.
1 lakh.
1 lakh. Okay. 1 lakh. So this is how this building will be treated. Now, what is the accounting for the income which lessor is getting as a lease rental? What is the accounting of this income? Rental income. How much rental income? How much rental income he is receiving? Rental income. Year 1, 2 and 3. Year 1, year 2, year 3. How much rental income he is receiving? This is my year. This is my rent. How much? 10,000 is per annum. So next year it will be? Next year it will be?
10% increment.
110%. In the third year it will be 12,100. Right? So, कैसे करें accounting? Tell me. These are the facts which are given.
P&L account, sir.
Lease equalization.
Friends, standard says that whenever there is an operating lease, the lessor has to account for the lease rentals income on a straight line basis, or some systematic basis. You remember I have covered this concept in case of low value leases. Yeah.
Yes,
Yes,
sir.
sir.
Where I have, given an example also that how to make an accounting entry in this case. In this case, what is my total lease payment? My total lease payment is 33,100. My total lease payment. What is my average lease payment? If in 3 years I will be getting 33,100, what
Divide by
will be
3.
my average lease payment?
11,030.
11,033 rupees. 11,033. Correct? This is my annual average lease payment. This is my average lease payment. This is my average lease payment. Average lease payment का मतलब पता है ना? You remember? मैंने आपको बताया था शुरू में कि the word is lease payment. Correct? But from the lessor perspective, it is inflow. It is not outflow. Word lease payment ही यूज करते हैं. आपने कभी सुना है आपके पेरेंट्स ने बोला कि उससे पेमेंट लानी है? So payment does not mean always outflow. If it is lessor, payment means inflow. If it is lessee, payment means outflow. Okay. So what is the accounting in year one? Year one. What is the accounting entry? Year one. Bank account debit. Bank account debit. To lease rental income. Bank account debit to lease rental income.
10,000.
Credit. How much is the bank debit?
10,000.
10,000. How much is lease rental income to be credited, to be accrued in the books of the lessor?
11,033.
33.
11,033. But the actual amount which is received is 10,000, but the income accrued is 11,000. So where the differential will go?
Lease equalization.
Lease equalization. Lease equalization reserve or asset? Debit.
Assets.
Asset debit. Lease equalization asset debit. It is not a debtor. It is not a lessee. It is a lease equalization asset debit. Okay. We are equalizing the lease. We don't have a right to ask this 1,033 from the lessee right now. Correct? So this is lease equalization asset debit. What is my year 2 entry? What is my year 2 entry? Year 2. Again, bank account debit. By what value? Bank account debit by what value?
11,000.
11,000. To lease rental income. To lease rental income by what value?
11,033.
Where the difference between 33 and 1,000 where will go?
Lease
Lease
equalization.
equalization asset debit. Right. What will happen in year 3? Again, you will get the money. Bank account debit. Bank account debit. By what value?
12,100.
12,100. To lease rental income. How much?
11,033.
11,033. Credit. Now there is a difference between debit and credit. 1,067. This will be credit. But what is the
Lease equalization asset. Reverse.
lease equalization asset will be credited to lease equalization asset. And what is the value which was there for lease equalization asset? This 33 plus 1,033. This is my 1,067. Actually, it is 1,033.33 in decimals, right? It is 1,067, the balancing figure. Correct? So this is how the accounting in case of operating lease will be there. The accounting in case of operating lease will be there, right? So accounting in the case of operating lease is pretty simple. We will be discussing accounting in case of finance lease, which is little complex. Okay. But not complex if you have already covered, since you have already covered the lease liability calculation and everything, it is not complex for you guys. Okay. But comparatively between operating lease and finance lease accounting is complex, right? From the perspective of lessor. I think this operating lease is clear to everyone, right? The lessor will use this property for 20 years, depreciate this property. Whatever income lessor is getting, the lessor has to recognize the income, and this income has to be recognized on a straight line basis, right? Now, concept of finance lease. Concept of finance lease. So Vinay is asking, sir, how to compute the lease term? Friends, you remember I have discussed the lease term. मैंने lease term discuss किया था जब शुरू में.
Yes,
Identified asset, right to control the use, then lease payment, then lease term. So there were 4 terms which were used in the lease term. Number 1, non-cancelable period, means lock-in, right? So lock-in period, it means you have to be in that period. If you will breach the contract, if you will leave the premise before that period, you have to pay the rental for that full period, right? That is a non-cancelable period. Plus non-cancelable period plus what?
Rent-free period.
plus rent-free period plus rent-free period, non-cancelable period plus rent-free period plus what? Plus
Renewable period
Renewable option.
with
If
plus
it's
conditions.
if
optional
reasonable to
renewal
exercise.
period. Optional renewal period if the lessee is reasonably certain to opt for,
Exercise.
or
Renew.
optional termination period, right? So these are the lease term which we have discussed, correct? So we have already discussed that lease term consists of all these four scenarios, okay? Yes, now let's discuss the concept of finance lease.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, but how will see from point of view lessor, less is reasonable certainty?
See, what happened from the perspective of the lessor, non-cancelable term you need to consider, right?
Yes.
Rent-free period you need to consider,
Right.
right? Okay.
Right.
Plus optional renewal period. Let's say the optional renewal period, this optional renewal period is at the discretion of the lessee or at the discretion of the lessor, right? If the renewal is only at the discretion of the lessee, correct? It is not at the discretion of the lessor. तो lessor के पास तो option ही नहीं है.
Right.
Correct. In that case, optional renewal period will not be considered. If option is given to both the parties, if option is given to both the parties, right? In that case, the lessor has to consider कि मैं इसको रिन्यू करूंगा या नहीं करूंगा, बट नॉट नेसेसरी कि लेसी भी रिन्यू करेगा, करेक्ट?
राइट.
सो उस केस में भी ऑप्शनल रिन्यूअल पीरियड को हम कभी भी कंसिडर नहीं करेंगे, उसको कंसिडर नहीं करेंगे, राइट? सो नॉर्मली फ्रॉम द लेसोर पर्सपेक्टिव क्या होता है, लेसोर के पर्सपेक्टिव से जनरली आप जब कंसिडर करते हो तो नॉन कैंसिलेबल पीरियड प्लस रेंट फ्री पीरियड को कंसिडर करते हो, आप ऑप्शनल रिन्यूअल पीरियड और ऑप्शनल टर्मिनेशन पीरियड को नहीं करते कंसिडर.
But if lessees have done significant improvements in that particular building or that area, then, sir?
So even though, what's your name?
Vinay.
So Vinay, even though, again you have to see the optionality, कि optionality किसके पास है उसकी, right? Optional renewal period की अगर optionality सिर्फ लेसी के पास है, right? और अगर मान लो आप उसको रिन्यू नहीं करोगे, ठीक है ना, आपके पास ऑप्शनलिटी नहीं है, सिर्फ लेसी के पास है, आपके पास उसकी ऑप्शनलिटी है ही नहीं, तो ऑप्शनलिटी नहीं है तो आप उसको कंसिडर ही नहीं करोगे ना, आप उसको कॉन्ट्रैक्ट को टर्मिनेट ही कर दोगे, राइट? और अगर मान लो ऑप्शनलिटी आपके पास भी है तो आपको उस केस में क्या करना है, आप कहते हो जी मैं तो रिन्यू करूंगा, बट सर्टेनिटी नहीं है कि लेसी रिन्यू करेगा उसको, तो आप उस पीरियड को कंसिडर कैसे करोगे? क्योंकि आप इनकम अक्रू कर रहे हो, तो इनकम जब भी आप अक्रू करते हो इट हैज टू बी मोर सर्टेन, करेक्ट? इसीलिए जनरली क्या करते हैं, लेसोर के पर्सपेक्टिव से आप ऑप्शनल रिन्यूअल पीरियड और टर्मिनेशन पीरियड को कंसिडर नहीं करते, रेंट फ्री पीरियड और नॉन कैंसिलेबल पीरियड को आप कंसिडर करते हो.
Okay. Yeah. Here last query, sir. If rent-free period is after lock-in period, not initially decided, then we have to include that period.
Yes, we have to include that period. वो चाहे पहले हो या बाद में हो, जैसे मॉल्स के केस में पहले होता है वो, राइट?
राइट.
एंड इन केस ऑफ अ कॉर्पोरेट लाइक एम्बियंस मॉल का अगर मैं बात करूं तो एम्बियंस मॉल का एक एम्बियंस कॉर्पोरेट टावर है, ठीक है, जिसमें कॉर्पोरेट्स के लिए ऑफिसेस हैं, राइट? So normally what kind of arrangement they have, initially they have the lock-in period of let's say 9 years and they are giving the rent-free period after 9 years, which is 3 years.
Right.
तो उसमें 9+3 consider किया जाता है.
Okay. Got it.
So accounting in case of a finance lease. So finance lease में क्या होता है? Finance lease is a situation where lessor transfers the risk and reward substantially to the lessee. For example, लेसोर ने बोला कि भाई लेसोर ने एक एसेट परचेज की, एक कार परचेज की 10 इयर्स के लिए, एंड लेसोर हैज गिवन इट ऑन अ लीज बेसिस टू द लेसी फॉर लेट्स से 8 इयर्स. सो इट इज फॉर द मेजर पार्ट ऑफ द इकोनॉमिक लाइफ, ओके? और लेसोर इज गेटिंग द लीज रेंटल्स which is more equivalent to market price of the asset, right? So it means lessee is compensating to the lessor for the price of the asset, for the cost of the asset, correct? So these are the indicators by which it signifies that the lessor has substantially transferred the risk and reward of the asset. Now, how the accounting of finance lease will be done in the books of the lessor, how this accounting will happen, friends? Let me explain you again with the help of an example. Okay. So I am putting an example. A Limited has purchased a car for rupees 8 lakhs on 1st April 2015. After 1 year, A leases out the car to B for rupees 1.25 lakhs per annum for 4 years. Right? Interest rate implicit in the lease is 10%. Calculate the necessary impact in the books of A Limited. Okay. Some more information is given in this question. The life of car is given as 5 years and unguaranteed residual value is given as 50,000 rupees. These are the information which is given in the question. A Limited has purchased a car for rupees 8 lakh on 1st April 2015. After 1 year, A leases out the car to B for rupees 1.25 lakh per annum for 4 years. So in the first 1 year, A Limited has used this car. What is the nature of this car when this car was purchased? What is the nature of this car in the books of A Limited?
PPE.
It was a property, plant and equipment. It was a PPE. Correct? It was a PPE. After 1 year, when A Limited decided to lease out this car, what is the remaining life of the car?
4 years.
4 years.
And for how many years this company A Limited wants to lease out?
4
4
years.
years.
4 years.
It means for the remaining part of the economic life, for remaining entire economic life, the lessor is leasing out this asset. It means lessor is substantially transferring the risk and reward of this asset at the end of the first year. So what happens at the end of the first year when lessor decided to lease out this asset? It becomes
Finance lease.
a finance lease. And unguaranteed residual value is also given in this question, which is 50,000 rupees. What is this unguaranteed residual value?
End of the life of the car, he will be receiving 50,000.
Scrap value, residual value, right? So in case of a lessor, like you remember when we were discussing lease payment, residual value guaranteed by the lessee or residual value guaranteed by the any third party related to the lessee or any third party, right? So, or any unguaranteed residual value. So basically unguaranteed residual value means a residual value which the lessor is expecting to receive. क्योंकि asset किसका है? Asset तो lessor का है ना? You remember in PPE how we were calculating the depreciation? Original cost minus residual value divided by the number of life, divided by the useful life. This is how we were computing the depreciation. ऐसे ही करते थे ना हम?
Yes, sir.
Right? So जो original cost में से मैं residual value less करता था, वो क्या थी? Typically it was unguaranteed residual value, right? For example, I am holding a car and I purchased a car for rupees 10 lakh. The life is 10 years. I am expecting that after 10 years, even though if I'll scrap this car, I will get at least 50,000 rupees. Right? अगर मायापुरी में मैं इस कार को as a scrap भी बेचूंगा, as a कबाड़ भी बेचूंगा, I will get a 50,000 rupees. So that is my unguaranteed residual value. That is my unguaranteed residual value. Friends, in case of a finance lease, when the lessor is recognizing the finance lease asset, finance lease receivable, lessor has to recognize that finance lease receivable on the basis of lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value. सर अगर लेसी ने कोई गारंटी दी है तो क्या होगा? Sir, if there is a guarantee which is given by the lessee,
That too will be included in that
that
calculation.
too will be included. For example, the unguaranteed residual value is 50,000. The lessor is expecting to receive 50,000 rupees. But at the same time, the lessee has given a guarantee of 30,000 rupees. Lessee ने 30,000 रुपए की guarantee दे दी है. Then what will become unguaranteed in that case?
20,000.
20,000. मैंने expect किया I will sell this mobile at 50,000 rupees. But Nisha has given me a guarantee of 30,000 rupees. Sir, not to worry. 30,000 I'll pay you. minimum is 30,000. So at least I have a guarantee of 30,000. 50,000 मैं एक्सपेक्ट कर रहा हूं, बट 30 का तो मेरे पास गारंटी है. तो मेरे पास गारंटी कितने का नहीं है? 20 का.
20.
So what is unguaranteed for me? For me, 20,000 is the unguaranteed residual value, right? So let me make this question more complex and let me write here. Lessee has guaranteed a residual value of, let's say, 30,000 to the lessor. Calculate the necessary impact in the books of A Limited. Let's solve this question.
Sir,
Yes.
that unguaranteed residual value 50,000 का हमको wording change करना पड़ेगा ना? That then it would mean that 30,000 is apart from this 50.
So basically, what happens? So I, as a lessor, is expecting I'll get 50,000 rupees, right? When I'll sell this asset, I'll get 50,000 rupees. Okay. But I am expecting 50,000 rupees, but lessee has also given me a guarantee of 30,000 rupees. So residual value तो एक ही होगा ना? ऐसा नहीं होगा ना कि 30 plus 50 अलग से. So मैं expect कर रहा हूँ 50,000 rupees, but out of that I got a guarantee of 30,000 rupees. So my unguaranteed will become 20,000 in this case. Okay. So मैं पहले as a lessor expect कर रहा था 50,000 rupees, but lessee has given me a guarantee of 30,000 rupees. So in this case, my net unguaranteed residual value will become 20,000 rupees. This is what I want to write in the solution, right? My net
sir.
unguaranteed residual value will become 20,000 rupees. Correct? वो मेरा net unguaranteed residual value बन गया ना. मैंने 50 एक्सपेक्ट किया, मेरे लेसी ने मुझे 30 की गारंटी दे दी, तो मेरा अनगारंटेड कितना बना नेट? इट्स 20,000 रुपीज. ठीक है, राइट? रेसिडुअल वैल्यू तो एक ही होगी ना, ऐसा नहीं होगा ना 30 वो भी दे रहा है फिर 50 अलग से भी आ रहा है. अगर क्वेश्चन में लिखा होगा इन एडिशन टू दैट, देन यू कैन कंसिडर द फुल अमाउंट, अदरवाइज यू शुड नेट इट ऑफ. करेक्ट? इज दैट राइट?
Yes, sir.
Solution. What is my first accounting entry when I purchase the car? What is my first accounting entry? Accounting in the books of the lessor. What is my first accounting entry?
Car PP account debit to cash or bank.
Lessor. ये कार इन्वेस्टमेंट प्रॉपर्टी तो नहीं होगी?
No.
Why?
Land or building can be investment
Land
property.
or building, only land or building can be an investment property. Car PP account debit to bank. What is the cost? The cost is 8 lakh rupees. 8 lakh. Okay, car PP account debit to bank 8 lakh rupees. Correct? Being car purchased. Being car purchased. So let me write the full amount here. Then what is the next entry as on the last date of the year? So this entry
Depreciation.
was 1st April 2015. This entry was 1st April 2015. What is the accounting entry on 31st March 2016? 31st March 2016. 31st March 2016. What is the accounting entry? Depreciation account debit. Depreciation account debit to
Accumulated depreciation.
accumulated depreciation credit. To accumulated depreciation credit. What is the depreciation? Divide by 5.
Sir, minus 50,000 करेंगे.
Minus
50,000 residual value.
करेंगे नहीं करेंगे रेसिडुअल वैल्यू?
करेंगे ना?
Yes. So PP, what is the formula of depreciation in PP? Original cost minus residual value,
Residual
scrap value divided by life. Okay. So my depreciation is equal to cost minus residual value divided by cost minus residual value divided by life. Divided by life. So is equal to 8 minus 50,000 is my residual value divided by 5. 1,50,000, correct? What is my carrying value at the end of the first year? What is my carrying value at the end of first year?
6,50,000.
8 lakh minus 1,50,000. Okay, 6,50,000. This is my carrying value at the end of the first year. At the end of first year. Okay. This is my carrying value at the end of first year, which is 6,50,000. Now, the lessor decided to lease out this asset. Now, this entity becomes a lessor. Till the first year, this entity was using the asset, using the car for its own purpose. Now, the entity is leasing out this car. So, what is the classification in the books of the lessor? What is the classification of the lease? Operating or finance?
Finance lease.
Classification of lease is finance lease. Finance lease. This is the lease classification. It become a finance lease. It become a finance lease. Okay. So it become a finance lease in the books of the lessor. Classification of lease is a finance lease in the books of the lessor. Finance lease in the books of lessor. Right. So जब finance lease होगी तो क्या होगा? There are 2 steps you need to follow. In case of finance lease, step number 1. Step number 1. What is the first step? Lessor has to de-recognize the asset. Lessor has to de-recognize the asset. क्योंकि सारे रिस्क एंड रिवार्ड तो ट्रांसफर कर दिए. स्टेप नंबर 2. सर de-recognize करेंगे मतलब कार को क्रेडिट करेंगे. कार PP should be credited, but what will be debited? What will be debited? आपने एसेट को क्रेडिट कर दिया, बट डेबिट क्या करोगे?
Investment in lease.
Net investment in lease.
Net investment in lease, or I can say finance lease receivable, जो पैसा आना है, correct? The lessor has to recognize net investment in lease or finance lease receivable. Okay, lessor has to recognize finance lease receivable, which is also known as net investment in the lease. And how this net investment in the lease is going to be computed? This will be present value of what?
Lease payment.
Future lease payment plus
Unguaranteed residual value.
Unguaranteed residual value. Right? Unguaranteed residual value. Okay. Right? So now we need to compute the present value of future lease payments. We need to compute. Okay. Calculate. Present value of future lease payments. What is my future lease payments? My year amount, present value factor, present value, right? What is my year 1, 2, 3, 4? 4 years only. Year 1, 2, 3, 4. Correct. What is the amount? Amount कितना है?
1,25,000.
1,25,000 per annum. 1,25,000 per annum. 1,25,000. Okay. For 4 years. 1,25,000 for 4 years. What is my present value factor? Discount rate is given as a 10%. Na? What is my present value factor for the first year? कितना आएगा?
1 divided by 1.10, that is 0.909.
1 divided by
10% rate.
1 divided by 1.1 divided by 1.1 divided by 1.1. Sorry. This is my discount rate. What is my present value? This multiply by this. Whether the calculation is over?
तो 50,000 का भी present value देना है.
Yes. In the year 4. So these were the lease payment. These were the future lease payment, right? Fixed payment. These were the lease payment. These were the fixed lease payment. Fixed lease payment. Okay. In the year 4, there is a guaranteed residual value. How much? 30,000. Okay. So what is my discount rate? ये तो सेम ही रहेगा. ईयर 4 के एंड में एक और है, अनगारंटीड रेसिडुअल वैल्यू. हाउ मच?
20,000.
20,000. So this will be the same. So what is my total present value of future lease payments plus unguaranteed residual value? It is 430,384. So what is my present value? My present value PV of gross investment in the lease. My PV of gross investment in the lease. So what it is known as a PV of gross investment in the lease का मतलब क्या होता है? Net investment in the lease. So what is my PV of gross investment in the lease? It is 430,384, right? So net investment in the lease, जब हम gross investment in the lease को discount कर देते हैं, net investment in the lease is equal to PV of gross investment in the lease. Equal to PV of gross investment in the lease. So this is my finance lease receivable. This is my net investment in the lease. So what accounting entry I will pass on 1st April 2016? What accounting entry I will pass on 1st April 2016? क्या accounting entry में pass करूंगा? I need to de-recognize the asset. I will make an accounting entry to car PPE account. To car PPE account. Credit. To car PPE account credit. By how much? By how much amount I need to credit car PPE? कितने amount से? First year के end पे carrying value कितनी? 6,50,000. I will debit what? I will debit net investment in the lease. Lease debit. I will debit net investment in the lease or finance lease receivable. Okay. Net investment in the lease, or I can call it as a finance lease receivable also. How much? 430,384. Friends, the asset value was 650. Now I am replacing this 650 asset with 430 asset. Where the difference will go?
P&L.
Interest income, sir.
P&L. Loss on derecognition. Derecognition of PPE debit. Right? This will go to P&L. This will go to P&L. Sir, ये तो समझ में आ गया कि फाइनेंस लीज रिसीवेबल यू हैव रिकॉग्नाइज्ड, बट व्हाट इज द सब्सिक्वेंट अकाउंटिंग, राइट? सो दिस लेसोर has de-recognized the PPE and recognized the finance lease receivable, financial asset, right? He has de-recognized the non-financial asset and he has recognized the financial asset. So what is the subsequent accounting? What is the subsequent accounting?
लीज पेमेंट का रिसिप्ट होगा और हम उसमें इंटरेस्ट कंपोनेंट दिखाएंगे.
Finance income.
Subsequent recognition and measurement. What is my subsequent recognition and measurement? Okay. इस क्वेश्चन में व्हाट इज माय ग्रॉस इन्वेस्टमेंट इन द लीज? व्हाट इज माय ग्रॉस इन्वेस्टमेंट इन द लीज इन दिस क्वेश्चन? What is my gross investment in the of the lease in this question?
550.
5 lakh.
Yes, 550. This entire lease payment plus UGRV, unguaranteed residual value, is a gross investment, and net investment is 430. Okay. Subsequent recognition and measurement. So let me prepare the finance lease receivable schedule.
So this unrecognized revenue is only notional amount only. That is it required to consider in the P&L account?
Subsequent recognition and measurement. Just hold on for a minute. Subsequent recognition and measurement. Okay. So we have created, we have recognized, we have debited my right, which I have foregone. So I have debited the right which I am going to receive is my finance lease receivable. I am getting a money. Okay. I will be getting a money. And I have de-recognized because I'm not getting any benefit from using that asset because I have already leased out that asset. I have substantially transferred the risk and reward, and hence I have de-recognized PPE and I have recognized finance lease receivable. Finance lease receivable, okay, which is net investment in the lease. Let me write as a finance lease receivable. This will be more clear to you guys. Finance lease receivable. So I recognized a financial asset, I de-recognize a non-financial asset because now onwards I will be getting the benefits from the financial asset. Okay. So the question is, sir, in the next 4 year, how much money you will receive? How much money you will receive in the next 4 year? 5,50,000. But you have recognized this asset at 430. So what is the difference between gross investment and net investment? What is the difference between the gross investment and net investment? Interest income. Interest income, right, Nisha?
Yes, sir.
Yes. So let me prepare the schedule for this lease receivable. Schedule of finance lease receivable. Lease receivable. Same schedule. Year. Okay. Opening balance. Interest income. Lease payment. Closing balance. How many years? Year 1, 2, 3, 4. What is my opening balance?
430,384.
What is my interest income? Multiply by 10% was the rate at which I have discounted. Correct? Multiply by 10%. What is my lease payment? 125. What is my closing balance? This plus this plus this. This will become my opening balance. Lease payment 125, closing balance this one. This is my balance, opening interest income, lease payment, closing balance. This is my opening balance, interest income, lease payment, closing balance. Right. So 50,000 have been left. Why it has not become zero? Why it has not become zero?
Residual value.
Residual value. Same. In the year 4th, what I'll do? In the year 4, there is a payment. There is a payment of what? Minus 30, minus 20. At the end of year 4, there is a payment. So now it has become zero. Okay. What is the accounting entry? What is the accounting entries along with impact? Accounting entries क्या होंगी? Accounting entries along with impact. Accounting entries along with impact. Accounting entries along with impact. What is my accounting entries? Particulars. Year 1. year 1, 2, 3, 4, right? Year 1, year 2, year 3, year 4. Sorry. Year 3, year 4. There is no year 5. What is my first entry? What is my first entry? At the end of year 1, what is my first entry?
Lease payment received.
Finance lease receivable
Interest.
debit. Finance lease receivable debit. Receivable debit account. Debit. To what? To interest
Interest income. Interest income.
income. To interest income. Okay, credit. To interest income credit. What is my year 1 interest? My year 1 interest income is 43038. Year 2 is 34842. Year 3 is 25826. Year 4 is 15909. And what is my total impact in P&L? Total impact in P&L. What is the total impact? 119616 is the total impact. What is the next entry? What is the next entry? Next entry क्या होगी? Bank account debit. Now you'll receive the money. Bank account debit. To finance lease receivable. To finance lease receivable. Credit. Okay. What is the amount? What is the amount?
1,25,000.
1,25,000. 125. Right? Is that right? Year 4, 125, 125. Is that right?
Plus 30,000.
Okay, 155. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
No,
sir.
20,000. Yeah,
It-
50,000. 125 plus 50.
So when you have computed finance lease receivable, right? Have you taken only 30 or have you taken the entire 50?
Entire 50.
Entire 50. Your gross investment in the lease is equal to lease payments from the lessee plus unguaranteed residual value, right? That is your gross investment in the lease. What is your net investment in the lease? Present value of gross investment is equal to net investment. And whatever is the net investment, that is the value of finance lease receivable. Correct? So friends, in this case, what you will do? In this case, you will to bank account debit to finance lease receivable 1,75,000. सर अगर 30,000 तो क्लियर है, मिल जाएगा. सर अगर लास्ट में 20,000 जो अनगारंटीड रेसिडुअल वैल्यू थी वो नहीं मिली तो क्या होगा?
लॉस हो जाएगा.
Yes, bank account debit will be 1,55,000. Finance lease receivable credit is 1,75,000. क्योंकि आपको ये तो जीरो करना पड़ेगा ना, फाइनेंस लीज रिसीवेबल 550. There will be a loss in P&L by 20,000 rupees. Right? वो no loss होगा. Okay. So this is the accounting entries. Correct. Are you clear on the accounting entries? Are you clear on this finance lease and operating lease? Are you clear or not clear on the finance lease and operating lease? Yes?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Clear, sir.
Friends, now I am covering sublease accounting concept. And tomorrow I will be covering one of the complex question on the finance lease in the books of the lessor. intentionally I'm not covering right now, right? Because I need to cover the sublease concept first, right? Then I will covering that one of the complex question from the ICAI study material, right? Only there is one question on the on this
9,091.
manufacturer dealer lessor. Sorry, are you saying something?
सर ओपनिंग बैलेंस 1,59,051 जो है उसमें 50,000 ऑलरेडी इंक्लूडेड है, राइट?
In which 15,000 is already included?
इसके ऊपर हमें इंटरेस्ट कंप्यूट करना है क्योंकि हमने डिस्काउंटिंग 50,000 की भी की थी
Yes,
सीआर
yes,
एंड
yes, yes, you're right. Yes, it is already included.
ओके सर.
Yeah. So that is why I'm telling you, na, your gross investment is equal to your lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value. Here I have told you, no. So basically what happened, you have to re-recognize the asset and you have to recognize the finance lease receivable, which is nothing, which is present value of lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value. So whatever is your finance lease receivable, you have to receive that money, right? And wherever there is a default, it will be your loss. Correct? वो आपका loss होगा ना वो तो.
यस सर.
Right.
सर कोई ऐसा क्वेश्चन है जिसमें फाइनेंस लीज में लॉस की जगह प्रॉफिट भी होता हो, प्रॉफिट ऑन री रिकॉग्निशन?
Yes, it can be. For example, largely finance lease में profit ही होता है, largely. So let me flip this question, okay? रुको मैं इस question को flip करता हूँ. Let me copy paste this entire question. Scenario 2, right? That was a scenario 1, okay? Finance lease, scenario 1, scenario 2. Scenario 2. After 1 year, A leases out this car to B for 1.75 lakh per annum. So let's say instead of 1.75 lakh, 1.75 lakh per annum. Okay? Rest, all the information are same. So instead of 125, I'll make it as a 175. 175. अच्छा अभी भी नहीं हुआ. थोड़ा और बढ़ा लेते. Not to worry.
2 लाख पर एनम.
Let make it 2 lakh. Okay? 2 lakh करके देखते हैं. 2 lakh. हाँ अब प्रॉफिट आ गया, right? So as per 2 lakh, it is 668,124. So my finance lease receivable is 668,124. Instead of loss, it will be profit. 2 profit on derecognition of PP. Derecognition of PP. Right. This minus this. 18,124, right? 650. ठीक है. अब क्या होगा? सब्सिक्वेंट मेजरमेंट ये अपने आप ही 0 हो गया. ये सब ऑटो कैलकुलेशन चल रही है. ये सब अपने आप हो गया. करेक्ट. और यहाँ क्या होगा? इंस्टेड ऑफ 2 lakh 175 it become 2,50,000. Correct?
करेक्ट है सर.
Okay. Any more wishes?
नो सर, क्रिस्टल क्लियर.
No. Okay. So let me. Hemant is saying, sir, we have not received 50,000. Hemant, we have received 50,000, no? That is why I've done is 250 instead of 2 lakh. At the end of year 4, I have made it 250. Right. If you will say that, sir, we have not received 20,000 of unguaranteed residual value, then it will become your loss. Okay. So Hemant, actually, the unguaranteed residual value was 50,000. Means the lessor was expecting that amount. But lessee has given a guarantee of 30. It means the remaining unguaranteed portion is only 20, not the entire 50. Correct. Yes. Yes. So let me take you on the Excel file. Sorry, not on the Excel file, on the PPT. Friends, we discussed this lessor accounting, operating lease, finance lease. These are the indicators. This is the accounting. Finance lease receivable account debit to underlying asset means derecognition of the non-financial asset and recognition of the financial asset. When you recognize this asset, right? So this finance lease receivable is equal to net investment in the lease, which is present value of lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value, right? If you have incurred any initial direct cost, that initial direct cost will be added to the cost of the underlying asset and it will also be amortized over the lease term, right? So finance lease receivable will be increased by interest income in the P&L and decreased by the receipt of actual lease payment. Operating lease, in operating lease, we have seen that we will continue to depreciate the asset and we will recognize the lease income on the basis of straight line basis, on the basis of straight line method. Friends, now let's discuss the sublease accounting, right? What is meant by sublease accounting? For example, I am having a car, right? I am the owner of the car. And I have given this car on a lease basis to Niranjan, right? For a period of 5 years. Niranjan has given this car on a sublease to Vinay for a period of 4 years. So in this case, there are 2 lease contracts, correct? What are these 2 lease contracts? Between Alok and Niranjan and between Niranjan and Vinay. What is the lease contract between Alok and Niranjan? It is a main lease contract. It is an original lease contract. And what is the nature of lease contract between Vinay and Niranjan? It is a
sublease contract.
Sublease contract. So, are you understanding the transaction? First, there is a main lease, original lease, then there is a sublease. So the question arises, what is the accounting in case of sublease in the books of the lessee who is subleasing this car? So the lease contract between Alok and Niranjan is considered as a head lease. And the lease contract between Niranjan and Vinay is considered as a sublease. Okay, so there are 2 different lease contracts. Now, if I talk about head lease, Alok is the original lessor, right? I'm the one who has given the car to Niranjan on a lease basis. I'm the head lessor. I'm the main lessor. I'm the main lessor. Who is the original lessee in this case? Who is the main lessee? Niranjan. Niranjan is the main lessee in this case. So head lessor is Alok, head lessee is Niranjan. So Niranjan is the main lessee, Niranjan is the head lessee. But the moment Niranjan subleases this car to Vinay, what is the status of Niranjan now in the sublease contract?
Intermediate lessor.
Niranjan becomes a lessor. Niranjan becomes a lessor. But whether Niranjan is the original lessor, answer is no. Niranjan becomes an intermediate lessor. So Alok is the main lessor. Vinay is the ultimate lessee, right? Ultimate lessee. So ultimately, who is using the car? Vinay is using the car. Ultimately, who is owning this car? Alok is owning this car. So Alok will be doing the lessor accounting. Vinay will be doing the lessee accounting. But what about Niranjan? Niranjan is lessee in the head lease contract and Niranjan become the lessor in the sublease contract. So how Niranjan will do the accounting? Have you understood? Have you understood this concept?
Yes.
Yes. समझ में आया मैं क्या बात कर रहा हूं? हम कौन सी कॉम्प्लेक्सिटी की बात कर रहे हैं? हम कौन सी अकाउंटिंग डिस्कस करने की बात कर रहे हैं? We are trying to discuss the accounting in the books of intermediate lessor who is the original lessee? Intermediate lessor, who is the original lessee? Right? Intermediate lessor, who is the original lessee? Right? Standard says that whenever this kind of arrangement is there, then how to do the accounting? Standard has given the accounting. So let me explain that. For example, life of car is 9 years. A Limited is the head lessor. It leases car for 7 years to B Limited. B Limited is a head lessee and intermediate lessor. Why? Because B Limited subleases this car for 5 years to C Limited, who is the ultimate lessee. Friends, there is a contract between A and B and contract between B and C. In first place, contract between A and B. Who is A Limited? A Limited is a lessor or lessee?
Original lessor.
Original lessor. What accounting A Limited will follow?
Only of lesser only.
Only of lessor. So इस केस में लाइफ कार की 9 ईयर है और उसने 7 ईयर की लीज पे दिया है. So will it be finance lease or operating lease?
Finance
lease.
It will be finance lease. Lessor will do, A Limited will do finance lease accounting. A Limited will do finance lease accounting. Correct? So A Limited क्या करेगा? A Limited finance lease accounting करेगा and A Limited will de-recognize the car and recognize the finance lease receivable on the basis of present value of the lease payment plus unguaranteed residual value. Right? What happens with the B Limited now? In the first contract between A and B, what is the status of B in the first contract?
lessee.
B is a lessee. B is a lessee. Hold on. B is a lessee. Okay. So what accounting entry B will pass?
Right of use asset debit to lease liability.
Very good. So B will compute what I am going to pay to A for the next 7 years. Present value of lease payment, present value of lease liability will become your right of use asset. So B will pass an accounting entry, right of use asset account debit to lease liability for 7 years, right? Okay. Now B has entered into an agreement with C. Now B becomes intermediate lessor, right? B subleases car for 5 years. What was the rights? For what period the right was given to B?
7 years.
7 years.
And B has transferred this right for how many period to C Limited? 5 years. Standard says that in case of a sublease contract, when B become lessor, B has to do the lessor accounting also. Contract between B and C में B को lessor accounting करनी पड़ेगी ना?
Yes.
तो lessor accounting करने के लिए either it will be a finance lease or it will be a operating lease. Right? So standard says that you have to consider, right? For considering the major part of the economic life, for considering whether it is a finance lease or operating lease, you have to consider the period of ROU, right? With the period of ROU which this intermediate lessor has subleases. So B Limited के पास कितने पीरियड का ROU है? कितने पीरियड का राइट है यूज करने का?
7 years.
7 years. And for how many period B is leasing out?
5 years.
5 years. It is major part of the economic life.
Yes, sir.
70-75% major part of the economic life for B Limited. So as a lessor, the contract between B and C as a lessor, whether it will be a finance lease contract or it will be a operating lease contract.
Finance lease, sir.
Finance lease. तो finance lease contract होगा तो B को क्या करना पड़ेगा?
De-recognize करना पड़ेगा ROU.
क्या de-recognize करेगा? B की बुक्स में एसेट तो है
ROU.
So B will credit to ROU. What B will debit? What B will recognize?
Finance lease receivable.
Finance lease receivable. B will recognize finance lease receivable and B will credit ROU. Okay. So ROU at what value?
Present value of future lease receivable from C.
Present value of future lease receivable from
C.
Whether B will de-recognize entire ROU or B will de-recognize partial ROU.
Entire ROU will de-recognize.
Why?
2 years is still there, no, sir, with B.
Right. So friends, let me let me tweak this example. I have purposely written this 5-year, 7-year de-recognize ROU. But B will de-recognize ROU, partial ROU. ROU for the 5-year period. The last 2 years is with B only, right? So this will hold good. This will hold good. What you guys are telling me, this will hold good if just a minute. So let me make it as a, whether my PPT is visible now. So let me make
Yes,
it
sir.
7 year, entire 7 year, and make it 7 year, right? Now it is right. Correct. So B will de-recognize ROU and B will recognize finance lease receivable. Okay. B will de-recognize ROU and B will recognize finance lease receivable. But what happened if B will lease out only for part of the period? तो क्या होगा? And if it is a finance lease, so B will de-recognize the partial ROU for 5 year only. Partial ROU, not the entire ROU, partial ROU. But in this case, B has subleases for the entire period of ROU. So it will be a finance lease and B will de-recognize entire ROU and recognize the finance lease receivable. What C will do? C क्या करेगा? C is the ultimate lessee. What accounting C will do?
Again, ROU debit to lease liability.
C will do the ROU accounting, ROU debit to the lease liability. Okay. So let's again understand this part with the help of illustration number 41, right? From ICAI study material. Where the intermediate lessor, where the sublease is classified as an operating lease. An intermediate lessor enters into a 5-year lease for 10,000 square meter of office space, the head lease, with entity XYZ head lessor, right? So intermediate lessor has taken a 10,000 square meter of office space on a 5-year lease basis, right? With the entity XYZ, who is the head lessor. At the commencement of the head lease, the intermediate lessor subleases the 10,000 square meter of office space for 2 years to a sublessee. How should the said sublease be classified and accounted for by the intermediate lessor? क्या होगा इस केस में? 5 साल की लीज थी, 2 साल के लिए सबलीज की है, क्या होगा? Is it a operating lease or finance lease in the books of the intermediate lessor? What will happen?
Operating lease.
Operating lease है sir.
Is it a operating lease or is it a finance lease in the books of the, yeah?
Operating lease sir.
This will be a operating lease. This will be operating lease, right? This will be a operating lease, correct? So operating lease होगी तो क्या होगा? Whether lessor will de-recognize any asset?
No.
No, sir.
So lessor, intermediate lessor will continue the ROU accounting as well as intermediate lessor will do the lease rental income accounting, right? So lessor will not de-recognize any asset in this case. Lessor will not de-recognize any asset. Right? Is that clear? So let me take you on the Excel file and let me explain you this entire accounting with the help of numbers. Okay. Shall I do that? Shall I do that? Okay. So let me, please confirm once my Excel file is visible. Is that visible?
No, sir.
Sublease accounting. Is it visible now?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Example. Sublease accounting. A Limited leases car to B Limited for 7 years. B Limited subleases this car to C Limited for 7 years. Life of car is 9 years. Lease rental charge by A Limited is 10,000 per year payable at the end of the year. Lease rental charge by B Limited is 12,000 per year payable at the end of the year. Discounted considered by all the parties is 10%. Right? Show the accounting in the books of intermediate lessor, which is whom? B Limited. करेक्ट. सिर्फ बी लिमिटेड की बुक्स में अकाउंटिंग दिखाऊं ना, बाकी सब में दिखाने की जरूरत तो नहीं है. Should I show the accounting in the books of A and C also, or B Limited is more than sufficient?
B is fine.
B is fine, no?
Yes.
Yes, sir.
So in this case, in this entire solution, A Limited is head lessor or primary lessor. B Limited is a head lessee and intermediate lessor, and C Limited is ultimate lessee. C Limited is ultimate lessee, correct? So just in this contract, A Limited is the primary lessor. B Limited is the primary or head lessee, primary lessee and intermediate lessor. C Limited is the ultimate lessee. Okay. So contract between A Limited and B Limited. Contract between A Limited and B Limited. Right. A Limited will do the lessor accounting as per finance lease. What B Limited will do? B Limited will do the ROU accounting as per Ind AS 116. करेक्ट, यही होगा ना. सो बी लिमिटेड क्या अकाउंटिंग करेगा? बी लिमिटेड विल डू द ROU accounting. So what is my lease payment in this case? What is my lease payment in this case? My lease payment for how many years? 7 year. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. What is my lease payment? How much B Limited is paying to A Limited? How much he is paying? Lease rental charged by A Limited is 10,000 per year, payable at the end of the year, right? 10,000. What is my present value factor? 10% is the discount rate. 1 divided by 1.1 is equal to divided by 1.1. This is my discount factor. What is my present value of future lease payments? What is my present value of future lease payment? Present value of lease payments. What is the accounting in the books of B Limited? क्या accounting होगी? Right of use asset account debit. Right of use asset account debit to lease liability. Please. So in the books of B Limited, as a lessee between the contract of A and B, the B Limited has done the lessee accounting, ROU asset to lease liability. Now what will happen? What will happen in the books of B Limited? When as per the second contract, contract number 2. So what is my second contract? My first contract is between A Limited and B Limited. My second contract is between B Limited and C Limited. Contract between B Limited and C Limited. This is my B and C contract. In this contract, B will be the intermediate lessor and C will become the ultimate lessee. Right? B Limited. इसमें B Limited क्या बन गया? Intermediate lessor. Intermediate lessor. So B will do the lessor accounting. And what is my C Limited? C Limited is the ultimate lessee. Let's see. So in the books of B Limited, right? So this accounting is happening in the books of B Limited, correct? In the books of B Limited. This accounting is happening in the books of B Limited. Okay. Now again, in the books of B Limited as a second contract, as an intermediate lessor. अब क्या करेंगे एज अ इंटरमीडिएट लेसोर बिटवीन बी एंड सी? क्या अकाउंटिंग करूंगा? लेसोर अकाउंटिंग करूंगा. वी हैव टू डू द लेसोर अकाउंटिंग. Whether it is a finance lease or operating lease.
Operating.
Whether it is a finance lease or operating lease. In the books of B Limited, as a lessor, I need to classify this lease as a operating lease or finance lease. Tell me, कौन सी lease है ये?
Finance lease.
Finance lease. Because lease classification will depend on the lease period of sublease comparing with the lease period of main lease. So B को कितने साल के लिए लीज पे मिला था एसेट?
7 years.
7 years. B ने कितने साल के लिए सब लीज कर दिया?
5 years.
7 years. मैंने 7 year लिया इस क्वेश्चन में ना, 7 years, राइट? 7 years. So B ने 100% सब लीज कर दिया, करेक्ट? So in this case, it is a case of finance lease. So it is a finance lease. फाइनेंस लीज अकाउंटिंग विल फॉलो. तो क्या करेंगे? फाइनेंस लीज अकाउंटिंग होगी. तो फाइनेंस लीज में हमने क्या सीखा था? फाइनेंस लीज अकाउंटिंग में वी नीड टू कंप्यूट व्हाट?
Net investment in lease.
We need to compute the net investment in the lease. This is what we have discussed. Calculate present value of future lease payment. This is what we are going to compute now. Again, we will compute net investment in lease. We will compute finance lease receivable. Correct? यही compute करना है ना हमें. Year, how many year? 7 year. What is the rent which B is charging?
12,000.
12,000. A had charged 10,000, B is charging 12,000. What is the discount rate for B? All the parties discounted 10%. It is given 1 divided by 1.1. Right? What is my net investment in the lease? What is my finance lease receivable?
58,421.
58,421. What is the accounting entry in the books of the lessor? Step number 1, derecognize the non-financial asset. Derecognize asset. 2, right of
ROU.
asset. ROU. कितने से derecognize करूं? 48,684. जितने पे recognize किया था वो derecognize कर दो. Recognize finance lease receivable. कितने से करूं? Debit.
58,421.
Credit. 58,421. Now where the difference will go? To profit on derecognition. Credit. This minus this. This is what the accounting is there. Have you understood the accounting now?
Yes.
अकाउंटिंग समझ में आ गई आपको? बी की बुक्स में बैलेंस शीट पोजीशन क्या होगी? व्हाट इज द बैलेंस शीट पोजीशन इन द बुक्स ऑफ बी लिमिटेड? बैलेंस शीट पोजीशन
Lease rent receivable.
in the books of B Limited.
Under financial assets, finance lease receivable.
So B की पोजीशन क्या होगी in the books of B Limited? What is the position of assets and liabilities? Assets.
Receivable
Just
would
a
be
minute.
there.
Right of use asset. क्या बी की बुक्स में राइट ऑफ यूज एसेट दिखेगा?
nil.
No.
Zero.
जीरो। कौन सा एसेट दिखेगा बी की बुक्स में?
Under financial
Finance.
asset, finance lease receivable.
Finance lease receivable under the financial asset, right? So B will show financial asset under finance lease receivable. What is the value?
58,421.
58,421. What is on the liability side? What is on the liability
Lease
side?
liability. Lease liability.
Yes, क्योंकि B को पे तो करना है ना 10,000 के हिसाब से. So there is a financial liability. There is a financial liability. ये है ना, एसेट डी रिकॉग्नाइज हुआ है, लाइबिलिटी डी रिकॉग्नाइज नहीं हुई. लीज लाइबिलिटी. हाउ मच इज द लीज लाइबिलिटी? कितनी है लीज लाइबिलिटी?
48,684.
48,684 इज माय लीज लाइबिलिटी. और क्या होगा, ये जो प्रॉफिट आया इस प्रॉफिट से क्या होगा? योर
Retained
रिटेन
earning.
अर्निंग. आपके रिजर्व्स में चला गया होगा ना प्रॉफिट. प्रॉफिट आपके कहां चला गया होगा? रिटेन अर्निंग्स. कितना था प्रॉफिट? 9737. 9737, करेक्ट. आपके बैलेंस शीट टैली हो जाएगी. योर बैलेंस शीट विल टैली या नॉट
Yes.
टैली?
Yes.
इस ट्रांजेक्शन का टोटल क्या होगा? 58,421. इन दोनों का टोटल क्या होगा? 58,421, राइट. योर बैलेंस शीट गॉट टैलीड, करेक्ट. सी की बुक्स में क्या अकाउंटिंग होगी? C is the
ROU and lease
ultimate
liability.
lessee. Shall I do the accounting in the books of C also? C की बुक्स की भी अकाउंटिंग कर दूं?
No, sir.
No? Okay. So C has to do ROU to lease liability accounting. So let me do that so that the entire leg is complete. Accounting in the books of C Limited. C Limited. C is the ultimate lessee. Ultimate lessee. Okay. So what accounting C will do? ROU to lease liability. Again, C will calculate present value of lease payment. C क्या पेमेंट करेगा? C को कितना पे करना है? 12,000. 12,000 C will pay. 10% का rate of interest है. So what is my present value of lease liability? 58,421. What is the accounting entry C will pass? Right of use asset account debit. Use asset account debit. Debit to lease liability. To lease liability. Credit. What is the amount? 58,421. 58. This is the accounting in the books of C Limited. ओके. ये ठीक है ना, समझ आ गया? ये सी की बुक्स में अकाउंटिंग होगी, करेक्ट. सो दिस इज द अकाउंटिंग इन द बुक्स ऑफ B, who is the intermediate lessor. First, B will recognize right of use asset and lease liability. Then B will check whether it is a operating lease or finance lease. If it is a operating lease, B will not de-recognize right of use asset. B will only recognize the lease rental income and B will not de-recognize any asset. But if it is a finance lease, B will de-recognize the right of use asset and recognize finance lease receivable. And B will recognize interest income on that finance lease receivable. Okay. And B will also, when B will receive the payment, B will reduce the finance lease asset. Okay. Correct. So I have shown you the balance sheet position also, so that you will be able to understand properly that how this entire transaction is moving and what is the picture in the balance sheet in the books of the B Limited, who is a what? In the books of B Limited, who is the head lessee and intermediate lessor. So friends, I have covered this sale and leaseback in detail with the help of illustration number 41 and this comprehensive illustration. So now the time has come to conclude the session, right? So today we have discussed the modification accounting, the lessor accounting in case of operating lease and finance lease, and the accounting in case of an intermediate lessor when the primary lessee or head lessee enters into a sublease contract. So he will become an intermediate lessor, and we have also discussed the accounting in the books of intermediate lessor, that how this accounting will happen. Okay. Is that clear? Is that clear?
Yes.
Yeah. You remember we have also discussed low value leases exemption. अगर low value lease में अगर sub leasing का concept होगा, you remember we have discussed one exception to the exemption. In case of a low value leases, if the lessor is subleasing the low value lease, अगर lessor subleasing कर रहा है तो low value lease का exemption नहीं ले सकते. You remember हमने discuss किया था.
Yes, sir.
Like in case of short-term lease, if there is a purchase price option, you cannot take the exemption of short-term lease. And likewise, in case of low-value leases, if you are subleasing, you cannot take an exemption of low-value leases. Okay. I'm just reiterating because this sublease concept came, so I'm just reiterating. So friends, thank you so much. I hope you have enjoyed the session thoroughly, right? So we will meet tomorrow and we will complete this Ind AS 116. Okay.
Sir,
Yes.
sir, here how will the P&L presentation will be there? Finance expense or finance income will be offset
Finance
or
expense and finance income. So let me show you the P&L presentation also. Shall I show you the P&L presentation? This is balance sheet position, P&L position. Right? Finance, interest income, okay, on finance lease receivable. This is your total income, right? Then your interest expense on lease liability. Correct? This is how this presentation will happen.
so we will not offset both these income and expenses.
No. It cannot be offsetted because you are paying interest to a different party and you are receiving interest from a different party. That is number one. Number two, the rentals are different. You are paying 10,000, you're receiving 12,000. And both the parties are different. Correct?
Okay.
So accounting in the books of C Limited is very clear. ROU you will depreciate and lease liability you will charge interest cost. Correct? वो तो ठीक है ना?
Yes, right.
Okay. So thank you, friends. Now I need to conclude the session because I have to go somewhere, right? Thank you so much. If you have any question, we will take your question tomorrow morning, right? And we will complete this Ind AS 116 tomorrow. We will solve one question of finance lease and we will discuss sale and leaseback transaction, right? Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Take care. Yeah, session is over.